Or I frozen.
Oh,
We're right. We're right. I think we're good.
Steve says hi.
I come.
Here. It says my internet connection is unstable, so it's probably me.
I think we'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you might not be. I can just do it. It's fine. Just log off. I got this.
Okay. Yeah, if I
That
froze
is,
for too
and
long,
that is never the case. That is never the case where I can do this.
you just go with it, run with it. Just text me if you need the slides to the next one, like moved. Well, Steve says we're both clear, so that's
Yeah,
good.
it's fine.
Funny.
Well, should let them maybe see if there's any more people coming in. Oh, they're still coming in. They're still coming in.
Okay. Hi, Gabby. Hey, Krista.
So you're doing the or maybe you already did it. The inequity mentorship.
Yeah. So that's. I don't think it's happening quite yet. I think it's like
Yeah.
May.
Yeah. I'm doing it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're doing the interview, right, on Instagram this
Mm.
Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with Gabby.
Yours was great. Yours was great.
Yeah, so much going on.
I'm ready for Jabby to like dig deep, ask me the
Yeah,
hard hitting questions that everyone wants to know.
journalism and like as if you're on. I can only think of CNN, but anyway, something like that. Your lighting can change colors, right? Which is pretty.
Correct. So if you need, text me if you need me to like change the mood at all. We're at a little kind of a blue state right now, but I can change it. This is like, oh, that's not very good. I'll just move it around. It looks like everyone's here. I guess we could start. Well, that's pretty intense. I don't hate it though.
Should I? Well, maybe not share my screen quite yet. You wanna?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Welcome. We're all excited to host you all. Mariko, how was your day today?
Good. Monday, whatever that means. Yeah. Can't.
I feel like you would have a lot of meetings on a Monday.
Don't you know it? Yeah, we do all our team meetings across, just BC and Ontario on Mondays. So yeah, Mondays are a little busy, but I get to check in with everybody and see how they're doing. I'm like, how was your weekend, everyone? Silence. Is kind of how it has been for a bit.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, thanks everyone for joining. There's some amazing people here. Not that we didn't last time, but there's people who are
Yeah.
between Krista and Rachel. Who else? There's someone else who Pauline, yeah, some really keeners. So we have new sakes for you. I couldn't make a whole new slides. I'm sorry. So you might have to look at the same photos. I will try to make different sake jokes if I can come up with enough. Probably not.
I don't remember the first set of sake jokes, so I think you're going to be good.
Okay, they were that memorable. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll do a super cut for all our YouTube recordings of like
okay.
Joke every now and again.
Yeah, it'll be like 2 and then end of video. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for everyone for being here. There's people from Edmonton. Dan is joining from all the way out there, all over Ontario, Ottawa. Where else? I think I saw someone from. Anyways, all over Ontario. Thanks, Nick, for getting all these pouches.
Guelph.
Yeah, and all across. To all these people. So Hakko Gakko is hopefully in the right room. That's what all my profs used to say. When you go into first day of class, they'd be like, hope you're in the right class.
Yeah. Yes.
Remember that joke? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So hopefully in the right place. You're going to be here for the next tonight and next 3 Monday nights at 7 p.m. to drink some sake and to listen to us talk about sake. It's meant to be fun and well, yeah, it's meant to be fun, interactive. And if you have questions, please do ask them and use the chat box, use the question box. Nick's going to help me um, field all of those and, make things a little clearer when when it needs to be. Yeah. So Hakko Gakko was a little thing that I had in my imagination, and everyone can see this now. Can you see the slides? Good. Okay. So let's see. Oh, play from start. So Hakko Gakko means school of fermentation, and I had it kind of in my imagination for a while, not just because it rhymes, but because I wanted to create some content with sake basics and some really interesting topics that I thought weren't available yet. There's lots of different schools and lots of different books and textbooks and classes, but I wanted something that was bringing in the stories and what the brewers wear to what kind of careers they used to have and where they're at now, right? Because that's what I think makes sake really exciting and fun. So Hakko means fermentation and Gakko is school, and Sean, the partner here, made this lovely logo for me. We're working on some merch, but maybe not yet. Sooner than later. Yeah. So I know we have a lot of different people from different diverse backgrounds, which is super cool. We have people who are chefs and people who are in coffee. I think we have some coffee roasters and people who brew Yamahai sake just for fun. So yeah, there's some people who this is gonna be like, oh, I know that. Yeah. I do not make sake. Yamahai is definitely not Yamahai sake, or a regular sake for that matter. I made amazake yesterday, just sweet sake.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Just yesterday?
Yeah.
You just threw it together?
Well, yeah, because I had koji from Izumi, from the
yes.
So basically, if you cook rice, add some water, add some koji, you make sweet sake, sorry. Right. So yeah, I did literally throw it together. Yeah. That wasn't very hard, to be fair.
Started to taste it.
So again, it's not this Hakko Gakko. There's 4 weeks, and each week definitely has a theme and a focus that I try to stay within. Sometimes I'm not so successful, but we do have a focus for each week and 4 sakes to taste through to illustrate those topics. Fermentation, we do have to cover some of the basics and what sake fermentation looks like, especially compared to other things that you might be more accustomed to tasting or seeing how they're made. So that we can talk about things that are in those kind of classic camps and groups, but also they're outside of that, which is fun, right? Hopefully. So keep those sakes in the fridge. We will taste them at the end, so that you can prepare. We'll give you 60 seconds or whatever, so that you can go to the bathroom and bring out the sakes from the fridge. If you have sake cups or other things that you want to use, go for it. I saw Nick using his Zelto, so I took out mine, hoping that I will not break one tonight. I only took out one, so. But you can use these, you can use anything you want. Yeah. Okay. So today's agenda, why are we here? We're going to talk about the things that I want to talk about, the stories behind each of these sakes and the sake industry kind of at large, because there's a lot going on. It's a pretty interesting time for sake brewers right this minute. Speaking of current events, in Japan, the COVID's getting worse for Japan. So the biggest cities have actually banned liquor stores from selling alcohol and restaurants from selling alcohol as well.
Is that an option? Can you just do that? Oh my god.
Yeah. It's pretty sad and scary. I mean, it's only in Osaka, Tokyo, the big cities. That's a pretty big blow for the people who run those businesses, but for the brewers as well, obviously. Yeah, so we have to drink more sake. to help out. Yeah. What we're well on our way. What's so special about sake? There's going to be fermentation details that do not apply to wine, but are going to be, really unique and special to sake that we want to get into. Brewing basics. I know it's a lot to cover in one day, but we do dissect some of the points later on, right? So we do focus on more of each of the parts, but today is a real shallow slice of a lot of different things. And out of the 4 sakes today, 3 are going to be quite classic. We chose them because they are very textbook and things that fit the bill. And then we're going to have 1 sake at the end that is very modern in style. And of course, in order to taste them, I know for some people, tasting sake is quite new. So we're going to go through some of the things that we're looking for, what makes a sake either higher quality or not, or what makes you like it more is really the big question. Because first and foremost, the whole point of this was that, you said to me, Nick, yeah, you said to me.
That was me. I did say that.
You said to me, I want to be able to buy sake, right? For Peter Pan or for myself. And I go, well, you go to sake bar and you're just overwhelmed by Stu.
Yeah, and then Stu just pours whatever he wants. I'm like, that is not what I want.
Yeah, which comes with ups and downs, right? So yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. So you want to be able to say, well, this is why I like this, I think, right? And I often say this, what I really aim to do is to make you excited and curious and maybe even confused enough that you might want to look into it more or kind of seek out why you like something. Yuna, who took our first class, said to me, oh, I think I like sakes with this rice. There seems to be a thread. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure if it could be the rice. It could also be the region. So she definitely liked West Coast sakes, which we realized. Yeah, regionality was a huge question, huh? On people's notes.
Mm.
And so,
yeah, I mean, still, it's. I mean, I still have to try to conceptualize regionality and continually redefine what that means in terms of sake. So, because that's what I like to do. Maps.
And we're going to see your maps a little later on, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they're ready. I just finished them about 10 minutes ago. So
That's all that matters. Yeah. Well, yeah, all 4 of these sakes tonight are from really distinct places. In week 3, we talk a little more detailed about regionality, but it's not going to only be there, right? We're going to talk about it today and next week as well, and week 4. Okay. So yeah, goals. What do we want to accomplish by at the end of the 4 weeks or even at the end of today? Is that we want to talk about what makes sake exciting. And I'm sure everyone has had some sort of positive experience with sake. That's probably why you're here. But there's so much experimentation going on right now. There's, whether it's new rice varieties, less polishing, different yeasts, brewers taking different ideas. Like Jabby asked me in the interview, which was a very specific question, about koji colors, what koji color makes more lactic or citric acid, for example. These are things that brewers are really asking themselves, right? And to try to differentiate themselves, to express themselves, and where they want to be. Yeah, the big questions are, where did it come from historically? Where are we at now? And where is it going? So what is it exactly? Brew like beer, finishes like wine. So the beer people out there, or if you've if you've seen the beer brewing, it is much closer to that process than it is to wine, right? So if you've been to a winery or you've made wine somewhere, or you've seen your parents make wine in a U-brew place, and then kind of the steps involved. But sake making is definitely much, much closer to beer brewing, which is why they're called breweries, and it's called brewing, right? And the people who make it is brewers. Rice wine is a popular term that I probably hate. Yeah, I'd say that pretty strongly. Yeah, I really do not like the restaurant.
Good.
Yeah, I'm gonna just like set that straight.
Fair.
Sometimes I dance around and I'm like,
I think
no,
it's a completely reasonable opinion to have.
Do not say rice wine because it is not that, right?
Rice beer. Of course, we know that.
Yeah, it's a beer. I mean, there's rice beer out there, and that's not it either. But it is much closer to brewing beer. But now more than ever, the range of aromas and flavors and the way we drink it, like even drinking out of wine glasses, is really much closer to wine. Yeah. So what we're looking at in this picture is this is like probably koji rice actually, but from this grain, we have to remember, of course, it is a cereal, it's a grain. From these grains, brewers are getting this extremely huge range of textures and aromas, and notes like melon and apple and pear, which I think is pretty cool, right? From rice, from grain, we're getting these flavors. So it is fermented rice. Some people call it a rice brewed beverage. It kind of sounds a little clunky to me, but you get the idea of it's brewed from rice, and it's a beverage. It's an alcohol. This is a little kind of summary of what a typical sake looks like or tastes like. So the color for most sakes is going to be clear, maybe colorless, water white. Some we call that in like WSET terminology. We have sometimes pale yellow or green. We have nigori, which means cloudy sake. We will talk about that later on. Then you have a huge spectrum of white, cream, maybe a little brownish if it's gone too old. But typically sake has very little color. Right? If it has a lot of color, then something is up with it, whether it's aged, maybe it had some heat damage. It could be also just the fact that it was a namazake that aged a little longer, but no sake starts out water white, just so we're all aware. So there's a lot of sakes, even in tonight's set of 4, that I think maybe only 1 or 2 of them would be close enough to water white. Right. So naturally, sake is pale yellow, greenish. Just pressed fresh sake is a kind of a light pale green. Yeah, kind of like the letters on my slide. That's kind of what I was going for. That's the color that you see. Okay. Aromas, you would get the spectrum of cereal, lactic, which sometimes people get like riciness. Right, the first sake, if you've gone ahead and open that because you've come back from work and you're off tomorrow, then you can start on that. That one is like cerealness. And then you have more fruity ones that have like melon, pear, licorice. All those notes are really common in especially the ginjo styles of sake. Right. But for a typical sake, for kind of our baseline table sake, another word for typical sake would be like table sake. If you think of like a very average red wine or white wine, that we're looking at the similar kind of what's the word, notes for sake. So everything's kind of average, kind of fruity, kind of ricey, maybe kind of acidic, everything's right in the middle. And on the palate, we have slightly sweet, lightly acidic sakes with about 15 to 17% alcohol. And that's really an average. There's a trend towards low alcohol sake, like 13, 14-ish. And then there's also genshus that can be 18, 19, 20% alcohol. Right? 22% alcohol is the limit for sake being legally called sake by the taxation board. So anything more than 22%, it's not a spirit because the production is different, but it's like a liqueur. Yeah, at that point. Yeah. So this is our typical sake. You might have had it, most LCBOs would carry some brands like this that have like a very average taste profile, right? And they're probably decently cheap and they're really accessible. So that's your typical sake. So how did it evolve? We do have to talk about where we came from. The last 25 years has been really, really exciting for sake, and a lot has happened. But before the last 25 years, or even 25 years or so, sake existed, and it was said that when you're in a drunken state, you can communicate with higher powers. I certainly feel that way when I'm under the influence. So yeah, it was supposed to be an offering to the gods, but it was also a way for you to talk or speak to higher powers. Right. So like wine, like beer, all over the world, alcohol kind of evolved, has that baseline story. I feel like origin story. Yeah. And this photo of this sigidama, it's a cedar ball. So breweries or even sake shops will have this cedar ball at the beginning of the season, and it's green at the beginning, right? So right now there's probably shinshu, so fresh sake that was just pressed, and fortunately they can't sell it at restaurants in the big cities, but it was to signify that they had fresh sake. So if you see this green ball, you should go in and buy some sake, because they probably have some good stuff there. And then throughout the season, it gets darker because the cedar branches, die, and then you have a brown ball. You can buy ones that are not real too. We should hang one at Peter Pan.
Yeah, I was actually last Hakko Gakko. I was looking on the internet on Amazon for the cedar balls, and
oh really?
Yeah, it's very hard to get your hands on something that's not that looks good or is not like this small or something.
Yeah. The little ones are. Maybe we can ask like a florist or someone to.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, because if you're making wreaths, this is, I think the fake ones are just like styrofoam with like sprigs in, and then you trim it to make this like tight ball.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
They're very iconic. As like years and years ago, the first thing when I first learned about sake, this was like they explained what the cedar ball was, and
really,
it's kind of a cool thing you kind of can look for if you ever see it. You're like, oh, this is a sake brewery. I think that's really fun.
Yeah, and like even I've seen sake brewers or sake shops in like California and San Francisco have miniature ones like this too.
Oh, that's really cool.
There's like in Nara, which was the old capital of Japan. There's temples that make these for the majority of brewers around the country. Anyways, that's the cedar ball. This is an ingredient list. If you look on the back of sake bottles, even in Alberta, it will give you the list of ingredients. So rice, I'm sure you can imagine that's going to be all the time. Rice, water, and yeast are always going to be in that list. Yeast doesn't actually have to be, though, funny enough, because with wine we don't have yeast, right? Like apparently the reason why this CFI says that you don't need to write yeast on there is because it can be naturally occurring. So we don't have to write that, but it is definitely an ingredient, whether it is added or ambient. And we talk about that later. So to go into each ingredient, rice, we have sake specific rice, and then we have table rice. So I had some dinner earlier, and the rice that I had was sweet red rice or black rice maybe, and so it's like long grain sweet rice. That's not what we're using for sake, right? So it is always japonica rice, from at least within Japan. I've heard some places in like Milan and Spain use so Italy and Spain use their own local rice varieties, but in Japan and the majority of breweries around the world would use japonica rice. So short grain rice, not sticky. And we have sake specific rice, which has been cultivated specifically for making sake. And there's things that make it good for sake, which we cover later. And then there's table rice, which is what you can buy at the grocery store and what we eat most of the time. Now, both of these rice varieties can be used to make sake, and table rice actually makes up the majority of sake being made. So, the omachi, yamada nishiki, all these famous rice varieties, sake rice varieties, get a lot of attention, but the real workhorse is table rice. There's lots of regional table rice varieties being used now, and they're talking about it more and more. Graded rice, so depending on the harvest and where it's from, the rice will get graded and be given a different price tag. Okay, so some years, some harvests, like the last few years have been really hard on farmers, because the harvest season, September and October, is also prime typhoon season in Japan. So in certain places, it's it's been wiped out in a large way. Yeah, so I worry about Burgundy and like grapes not making it through frost season, and rice. I mean, like, and not having enough rice.
So many things out of your control that you worry about. I'm like,
right?
Frosts
Yeah.
and
Nature.
Typhoons, winds.
Yeah. So many things. And yeah, different rice varieties have different different characteristics that make them more suitable or less suitable, or just different. And one of the big trends is that brewers are more and more embracing the differences and not talking about just one rice variety. Like Yamada Nishiki, the metaphor a lot of people use is yutose, so like a grade A student. So Yamada Nishiki is a grade A rice, grade A student. It's easy to work with. They follow directions. You can mold it really well. I'm not sure if that's a characteristic of a grade A student, but you know what I mean. But now there's rice that is more like wild and harder to control. That brewers are saying, well, we like this for this reason. Okay, skip to water for a second. My photo wouldn't flip the right way, so it's supposed to be a stream. You can see the like lightning. This is a water source. Like it's the.
I didn't even notice until you said it. No one would have said notice.
Like I kept turning and being like, why not? Anyways, this is a little like not river. It's what would this be? If it's running through the mountains. The stream. There we go. That's where
stream.
Yeah, it's a stream in Niigata. So this stream supplies a lot of breweries, but specifically for this, it supplies Hakkai-san Brewery. It's one of the sakes I think we're going to have on week 4. But Niigata is on the west coast of the main island. It's beautiful, soft water, very, very like great for farming, fishing. So you get some great food ingredients there. But yeah, so water, that's, what I consider like poetic water. We have very pretty stream water or underground well water. One of the breweries, Sake number 2 tonight, has the water that they use for this brewery is all from Mount Haksan, and it's called the 100-year water, right? Because it takes 100 years from the mountain to the brewery. So poetic water, brewers love talking about why their water is so lovely and so special. And that's very, very true. But in reality, any clean water will do, right? You don't want high amounts of like metals, heavy metals, but for the most part, if you have clean water, you can make sake, right? And there's also things like adding more minerals or removing minerals or removing whatever you need to, because we live in a modern society now, that you can do to your water, right? The same way that if you are in a coffee competition, you can add a tablet to your water, to your distilled water, to make like perfect brewing water. You can do that with sake as well. Koji, anise, we talk about more later. These are 2 very different things. Sometimes they get lumped into one. People go, oh, koji is yeast, right? It's not. Like koji is very important, anise is very important, and they're 2 different things. Chemically, like they're just different beings. So just remember that. Okay, and koji is going to be is responsible for making sugars available, and yeast is going to be what's responsible for making yeast into alcohol. So because I didn't have yeast today or yesterday in my sweet sake, I have a sweet sake with no alcohol that I put into yogurt. I was very proud of this. My yogurt.
Delicious.
Yeah. On the left, Matsumoto-san, this is Hide.
Matsumoto-san.
With his, I don't think he would appreciate me sharing this photo to 35 people, but oh well, he's not here.
Looks a little hungover, so.
there's a good chance, brewers they love going out and eating. Not everybody, but he definitely does. So this is Matsumoto-san from Matsumoto Brewery, Shuhari in Kyoto. And they had some family drama, but besides that, this is their well water that runs 150 meters below ground. And all year round, it's quite warm. So if it's cold outside, the water feels warm because it's 15 degrees and vice versa in the summer. Okay, so Fushimi in Kyoto is famous for their soft, plush water, and the real comparison was always Fushimi and Nada. Nada is in Kobe, and then Fushimi is in Kyoto. So Kyoto, this is also where Gekkekan is. There's some very large and very good, successful breweries in Fushimi, and a lot of people attribute that to the water, the soft water. On the right, this is Fukumitsuya. So sake number 2 tonight is from Fukumitsuya. And the tradition that you were drinking, Nick, from that you got Uncle Mikey's, that's also from this brewery in Ishikawa. Kanazawa is such a lovely city. It's very Kyoto-esque, but smaller, less tourists. Well, yeah, no tourists anywhere now. But this is me and Miki and Yuri, where we're visiting this sake brewery, and the water that's coming out, that's their well water as well. And this is called their 100-year water that I was talking about. So when we get to your map later, Nick, we can point out, I think you have it on your map usually, Hakusan, Mount Hakusan. Yeah. So the water that ends up here is said to originate from Mount Hakusan, and it takes 100 years to get to here. Again, I don't know, like if they carbon dated or like they put a counter on, but it takes a really long time, probably around 100 years. And along the way, it picks up minerals, but also gets filtered. So the water here, kind of uncharacteristically for Japan, is a little more mineral heavy, right? And the style of the sake in this region, because of the water and other reasons, but water is a big part of it. The water being harder, you get more like structured, higher acidity, less floral sakes in Ishikawa, which is on the west coast of Japan. I feel like there's a question I forgot. Oh, why?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, Jabby, why cedar? Sigi, the cedar trees were always said to be holy, and like temples and shrines would be built out of cedar. So there's an abundance of cedar, but because they're so big and grand, I don't know the real like religious part of Waisigi, but because they're so big, I think, and so impressive, they were used for temples and shrines. Okay. So let's talk rice. This is a photo of rice field for Yamagata Masamune. So Mitobe-san in Yamagata grows his own rice, and this is one of his fields, which is very, very uncommon. Just to put that in there. So the rice that we are talking about usually for sake brewing is japonica, and there are exceptions to this rule, like again, like in Milan and I can't remember exactly where in Spain, they are using some local varieties, but japonica, short grain rice, is what we're talking about. Table rice and sake specific rice, they're both japonica and short grain, so they're not the sticky type. You can use sticky rice for other parts of the brewing, but usually you're using the non-sticky types. And within sake-specific rice, so rice varieties that have been cultivated for specifically making sake, there's over 100 types. But the top 5 make up over 50% of the production. So we're talking about like the rice superstars, the Yamada Nishiki, Omachi, Oyakumangoku, Miyawa Nishiki, Dewa Sansan. We would talk about this later in a different week, but these are the varieties that make up more than 50% of the production. When we're talking about sake-specific rice. But the majority of sake by volume is made from table rice. And you can use table rice of all different types from different regions for very, very good sake. And in fact, there's just a lot more focus right now on using these varieties. Right? Because like, I'll probably mention again later, but if you use Yamada Nishiki rice, and polish it to a certain degree and use aromatic yeast, you're going to get a nice sake. If you're a good brewer, you can make a good sake with this recipe, right? But there's more interest and focus and attention on talking about, what about Hokkaido rice, or what about southern, so like Kyushu rice. Yeah. And the phrase that some people in the sake industry still use is YK35, where you use Y, Yamada Nishiki rice, K for Kyokai, so Brewers Association East. And if you polish your rice to 35, you get this like really lovely, easy sake. I believe this is kind of what you would call the Pinot Grigio sake.
I mean, that statement's gonna live longer than I will. But it is true.
Yeah.
It is true. Yeah. That level, in my mind, that type of sake tastes very one-dimensional and tastes more about a trend rather than like.
You say trim?
Trend, like a trend.
Yeah.
But that's just my like opinion. That doesn't, it means nothing.
No. I totally agree that like most daigenjos are pretty like one-dimensional. They're not complex. You can't. We'll talk about why they're not complex in the next slide, I think. But they end up being kind of the same.
Yeah, and you're paying more for, like, it's a more work to make it. I understand that, but you tend to be paying a premium for something that, I don't know. I much prefer a cheaper sake that has a bit more breadth, a bit more flavor, a bit more wildness to it. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and character. And usually they're focusing on different rice and like different polish. And I know there's rice. Yeah, there's rice now that is polished like 90% or even less polished, right? So it's like basically using brown rice to make sake. And what happens then? So these are all like really big questions that we're asking now. And daigen just typically tend to be like pretty sweet, so that makes it hard to drink a bottle. Farming. So farmers around Japan, they grow rice and sell to co-ops, or they work directly with breweries or with like groups of breweries. But after World War II in Japan, the national government decided that they were going to make sure that everyone had enough rice to eat by not allowing corporations to buy up farmland, right? So they thought that if they let companies make money, profit from farming and rice production, that people were going to be without food. So to make it equitable, they have farmers grow the rice and they sell it to the agricultural co-op, and the government pays them a fair price. The co-op pays them a fair price was the scheme, was the setup. But of course, not everything works according to ideology, and we've had some major issues with this co-op system. I know I have a friend who did a master's thesis, I think, on the co-op system in France and how that didn't work out. So I think this is a common story around the world where a lot of things are being put into question now. No. And now the sake brewers are working directly with farmers. So they say, okay, we will make sure that every year we promise, it's in contract, that we'll buy all your rice, good or bad, every single year for the next how many ever years, right? And that ensures that the farmers can survive. Yeah. And then in 2018, the government did start allowing companies to buy farmland, which has meant that sake brewers are buying farmland. I haven't heard of any like grossly, humongous corporate entity buying out farmland because, well, it's not very profitable probably, and it's a lot of hard work, to be honest, but we all know. So we haven't heard of anything too extreme yet, but who knows, I guess. It could be hard playing. But farming in Japan, farmers are getting older, younger people don't want to farm. There's some exceptions of like really hipster, cool looking farmers doing interesting things. But for the most part, it's definitely an aging group of people farming. Yeah. That's why a lot of sake brewers are buying up land. They're trying to reinvigorate their villages. Wet rice farming. So the flooded paddies, the flooded fields is the most common method of farming. It came from China. This like monks who traveled, they brought this method back. Organic farming is quite rare still. It's being talked about and it's being done, but for lots of different reasons, it's still really difficult. And when farmers are already struggling with just selling regular rice or crops, it is hard to, for some people, it's hard to have to try methods out that might not ensure them money. Yeah. Terroir is a really good question that's being talked about across the country because of the way that rice is planted and cultivated. So the seedlings are planted elsewhere and then put back into the fields. Not planted, so the seedlings are grown in like basically hothouses, right, in little like cups, and then they're planted into the farm. So it is hard at this point to talk too much about terroir and the like how long the roots are, because they're pulled up every year, right? But it is a question being asked, like whether you plant location A versus location B, that's this elevation, this aspect, this kind of geological footprint, geological makeup, it does make a difference. So these are things that people are going to be talking more about, definitely. There was another question. Pre-World War II, what was the deal? I'm going to leave it to Jabby for the, the big question. Pre-World War II, so I don't know between like the feudal system and then what happened in World War II and then now. But I'm sure everyone knows like samurais and the feudal system for many hundreds of years was the main way, right? This wasn't a fair system either, but the farmers would give taxes using the form of rice that they cultivated back to their feudal lords, so that they own the actual area, the actual farms, and the feudal like peasants would have been the ones farming, doing the hard work and giving rice to the warlords often, or some also to the people like royalty. Yeah. Okay. So why sake rice? Why is sake specific rice more expensive, more harder to grow, and we talk about it a lot more than table rice. At least is the case right now. Shinpaku is a big thing. We talk about that next slide. Shinpaku, the characters mean heart. In the direction that it's written in, it's a heart white, so it's a white heart. And then we talk about the size of the grain, so how physically large each of the grains are, and how easy is it to work with. So I was saying earlier, Yamada Nishiki, it's considered really easy, like really easy to control. You do this to it, and this is what you get is the result. Like it's very like consent. Yeah, it's understood a lot easier, right? Whereas even if we're talking about sake rice, omachi rice, you can get results that you didn't expect. It takes a lot more work to be able to deal with it. So how is it to work with? Not just fermentation and how it dissolves, but also polishing. So rice is polished for making sake, or even for eating. Most people would eat some sort of polished rice, right? And how easy it is to polish that rice can also depend on what kind of rice that you are using. Okay, so Shinpaku, the white heart, you can see the characters there. The first character here is heart, and the second is white. And you can see in both of these photos, hopefully the one on the left, you can see in the middle, there's this like darker white, less see-through portion, and that's the Shinpaku, right? And this is where there's the most concentration of starch. If you look at your table rice, no matter how hard you look at it or like you crushed it, you wouldn't be able to see the shinpaku. It doesn't exist. So with table rice, it's mixed in there. So the starch, the proteins, the lipids, the vitamins, all the different things that make rice tasty and more nutritious are mixed in table rice. Whereas if you cook sake rice, sake specific rice, and eat it, it tastes actually quite light and like not very tasty. Right? Is big combination comparison. I've seen some sake breweries try to help farmers this year because there's an excess of sake rice by making different things like amazake or like kind of like a Van de France mix of sake. And I've also seen brewers or farmers try to sell sake rice and like to the general public. And it's really interesting. Like I think Nancy did an article on it on her blog this year. But eating it is interesting. Like it's really cool because you can taste that it's so different from table rice, but it's not tasty. Like it doesn't give you this like umami and like fulfillment that regular rice will give you. Yeah. So the rice polish ratio, it says rations, right? Rice polish ratio, RP or RPR, you'll see on bottles or like spec sheets, is one way to categorize sake. And this is just one way, one number that can tell us some things and, not really much as well, depending on how you think about it. But the rice polish ratio is a number that is not always. Like I've seen actually in Alberta for Dan, who's from Alberta on this call, it's not a requirement apparently. So a lot of importers don't write the polish level on the back label, but usually they will. And it's what is left over. But the outside layers, and I put layers in quotation marks because it's not a banana peel. Like it's not just like poop and it's gone, right? But you do see like in this picture even that there is a difference between the outside kind of like clearer part and the inside, which is the shinpaku. This is a photo of rice sake rice that's been polished down. And you might have seen it in different places. It's kind of like the first thing that, Nick, you learned about cedar balls, but a lot of people start out with this like graph. I think Betsai even has like packets on some of their sakes that show you their polishing. So brown rice is on the left. It's 100%. The germ has been removed, so that little like looks like a broken tooth, very brown tooth, but broken tooth. This is where the germ would have been, and that's been removed. So without that, it's still 100%, right? And brown rice, you can use it for making sake, and producers like Terra Honke and some others, people are doing it, but you do get a lot of fats and proteins and things that give you a lot of acidity, right? When you taste sake that's 100% or like 90%, they're just going to be a lot more wild because the nutrients will interact with the fermentation, and you get a very wild, very big, very like funky sake. So, if you don't list, okay, I'll answer this question in a sec. And then we go down 70, 60, 50, and as you can see, it's getting smaller, right? And you can see that the shinpaku rate, like ratio-wise, is getting bigger, is higher in the 50%. And 50%, you can see that the like clear part, the non-shinpaku part, is a lot less than the 70%. So 70, 60, 50, that is what remains. With sakeyu, seimabuai is the Japanese term for it, and it is always what is remaining. So if you say a sake is 60% seimabuai or polishing ratio, you have to assume that that is what's left over, right? And these numbers will give you an indication of the cleanness of the sake, how like much texture it might have, and what that style of sake could be called. And there was a question about the polishing. I think, Dave, if you don't list the ratio, then you cannot categorize as Jinmai Ginja, correct? You can. So like I've seen sakes that say Jinmai Ginjo, and it doesn't tell you the number. So I would assume that it's 60%, but they don't. I think in Japan, you have to declare it. Here, I don't think anyone cares? Like whether it's the LCBO or AGLC, they're not looking at the numbers and if it corresponds to the polishing or not. Yeah. So again, as we go down, smaller and smaller, the most polished rice used for sake is the absolute 0, and it is polished down to like 0.85 maybe, I think. So less than 1%, right? So that's the most polished. Yeah.
So stupid. It sounds stupid.
Yeah, it does sound stupid. It's like so many thousands of dollars that I would not spend. Yeah.
It's like rice dust at that point. Like it just feels like it'd be just like you sprinkling rice.
Yeah.
And you just kill it. Boggles my mind.
You would start with a sake rice, or a rice at least, that is quite big, right? Like we talked about the size of the grains. If you start out with a bigger grain, then that would be easier to achieve. And also, someone was trying to explain to me that if you start with like 100% and then you cut it in half, obviously that's 50%. But just the way that like the math works, to get to like 25% is actually apparently not that hard. Like it's not that little. Yeah, I believe that, but there's people far smarter than me on this, so you can look it up. The way that things are polished, different machines, like there's Daishichi is a brewery that I think was the first brewery to start this polishing method, where instead of polishing it from like all around, they would try to put this like spin on the rice so that it would polish to the more of a sphere, right? So yeah, so there's like genke, hempe, different methods of polishing, yeah, into different shapes. Very, very fancy stuff. Okay. So minimum requirements, right? So these numbers are important. Like 100%, there are minimum levels that you have to polish to in order to call it something. But as we'll see tonight too, like it's only one thing. If you want to call something a ginjo, it better be a ginjo style, or else people are going to be upset. Not just me, but like people in general are going to be like, "What's not a ginjo?" But again, to talk about the basics here, 100% brown rice. If you're using this rice, then this could be a jinmai. It also could be a futsushu, which is table sake, right? And then let's go down to. I organize this better in a different graph, by the way, so don't get confused here, okay? Because this is for everyone else watching, because this is only one diagram, okay? So 100% brown rice, you can make jinmai and futsushu, so table sake, and then 70% you can make honjozos, which is our sake number 1 tonight, or if you don't add alcohol, it could be a jinmai. 60-50, it can be a ginjo, dai ginjo, or a jinmai version of each, and we talk about that, so don't get angry with me yet.
Guys, don't get so angry, guys.
Yeah, you're like, don't take that slide away. I can imagine someone in like a lecture be like, no, I need to copy down the notes. It'll come up again. Don't worry about it. So this photo on the left, the polishing stone, is what is inside a polishing machine, and this is from Hakkai-san, right? And you can see all these like columns. It looks very industrial. It is like each one. I think Hakkai-san has 4 separate polishing units that are in this one room. But each one is like $250,000. It's very, very expensive. So most breweries don't have these. They would buy the rice and then have someone polish it. Then they get it delivered polished, right? So for different amounts.
It's kind of like wine in a lot of ways, like with bottling and filtering and stuff. You doesn't necessarily indicate whether you're fancy or not fancy. Sometimes you can't invest in that kind of equipment.
Yeah. Or you go, well, that's not worth it. Like I am going to invest in this, but not this, right? So, and also like, I remember being in some village in Burgundy, and the whole town, they work within wine. So whether it's like filtering people or canning or bottling people, there's an economy there and set up for it. So
canning, definitely want Burgundy in a can. We've got to get that started. This is not the forum to talk about canned Burgundy, but
canned Burgundy. But like even on a beer brewery, like you can see like bus, like a truck pull up, and then they open up, and then there's a canning facility or bottling line. Even for like BC wineries, you see that too. I imagine in Ontario wineries too, right? Yeah. Okay, so
absolutely.
Polishing machine here. It is like if you if you sharpen your knives at home. I do not, because I'm not good at it. If you sharpen your knives at home, this is kind of like the same kind of mechanism. So the rice in the hopper would fall past this polishing stone, which is churning, and every time it falls past it, it takes a little bit of the outside layer each time. To get to 50% rice polish, so get from brown rice to 50%, we're talking about usually around 48 hours nonstop polishing. Right, it's a long time. And then these are all like done by weight. So if you start with 100 kilos and end up with 50, that's way too small of a batch, but 50 kilos, and that's 50%. And it's all done by weight and computers. And so it's very precise. And the rice polishing machines, this kind of, it has made it possible for sake to be as precise as it is now. Because even 50 years ago, these were invented really at the beginning of the 1900s, and to be commercially available has only been in the last 50 years or so. And so really, really new technology, but what's made sake as exact and precise as it is now, right? So this keeps churning, and the rice falls past it, and it polishes the rice. Okay, so what's so hard about brewing sake? Why is fermenting sake or fermenting rice so difficult? One of the big things there's so many things about sake that is difficult, but one of the things that is very different is that unlike grapes, we don't have sugar with sake. Right? The rice, you can cook it, you can steam it, you can like step on it, but you're not going to get sugar. And so in order to create the sugar, we have to take the starches in the rice and create sugar from within, right? And this is the role of koji. So koji, again, some people say, oh, it's like yeast, right? It's not. Koji is very specifically used for creating sugars. So the saccharification process, that is what koji is used for. Right? And you can be used in sweet potato, barley grains. You can make sake, shochu, soy sauce, miso. It's been used in Eastern Asian countries. Well, it started in China and Korea, and then it moved to Japan. But it's a really, really fundamental process of creating the starches to make miso and soy sauce and all these seasonings that we know so well. There are different types for making sake, as Jabi said in the interview. There's yellow, there's black, there's white koji. Those are the three big kind of camps that these koji varieties are. But yellow koji is what is most used for sake brewing. Okay. So I was saying before, white koji is really trendy right now. A brewer called Aramasa made this kind of mainstream, like a popular topic, but using white koji will give you more citric acid. It was always used more for shochu, so a spirit, but it gives you more citric acid, which is why he started experimenting with it. And citric acid, lime zest, citrus flavors. Those are really refreshing and pretty. So he's experimenting with that more and more. Parallel fermentation. So this parallel fermentation both fermentations happening together in parallel. I feel like I repeated myself there a lot, but these two things happening together in parallel is very unique to sake. Okay, so starch to sugar, the starch is from the rice, the sugar is created by koji by making enzymes, and then the available sugars now being available to yeast to make alcohol with happening together is very, very unique, and not, I think there might be some things that go through a similar process, but it is very unique to sake. Okay, so the ratio that brewers strive for all the nerdy people here, everybody probably, is that for every two sugar, you're trying to make two sugar molecules in order to make one alcohol molecule. So this this conversion, you don't want to run out of sugar, right? So if you run out of sugar, then the yeast is strained and it gives off weird flavors. So you want to create enough sugar, but not too much sugar, so that the yeast is always happy, but not too happy. And brewers love talking about this like very like S&M process where they're like ametamuchi, so like candy and whip. So you can't give your child too much candy because they'll get cavities, but you can't like whip it too much either, because then
yeah, the balance. Sure.
So that balance of creating enough sugars but not too much, so that the yeast is never too happy but not too strained. That's the art of brewing that sake brewers have managed to perfect over the last hundreds of years. That's pretty cool, right? Because we're just again talking about rice, water, koji, and yeast, and then we're able to get this like ratio that I don't know how people like 200 years ago did it, but trial and error, I guess, necessity. Yeah. So these two processes happening in parallel is a complex fermentation, and you get flavors that are really different from a simple fermentation. And you have alcohol levels that can be up to 23, 24% without the yeast dying. Because with wine yeast, up past 16% maybe, it would be too much, right? Alcohol would kill the yeast. Because with sake it's so gradual, you're able to get your alcohol levels up to like 22, 20 plus. Yeah. So it's kind of like, when you're in the bath, if you gradually warm it up hot, like you don't notice. There's a fable there, I think, like a frog fable. Anyways, about like how if you're sitting in it and it gradually goes up, if the sugar levels, alcohol levels slowly go up, then the yeast never like realizes that it needs to, it's being,
I think it's a fable. I think that's how they cook frogs.
Really?
They just, no, but like that's
that's so cruel, huh?
Anyway, that's fair. But I don't know. I think it's reality is that they like experimented on frogs, but
maybe. Yeah.
Neither you know that.
Okay. Koji, are all koji strains for sake Aspergillus oryzae or no, I know Jonah, I know where you work. So sake, yeah, Aspergillus oryzae is what is used for shochu and miso and things. Often Aspergillus soze. It can be used. I don't know what
I was looking it up. It's used in Okinawa to make awamori. Awamori?
Okay. Yeah.
They use this aspergillus to do that.
Okay, the luchensis.
Yes.
I have
there
to.
You go.
Awamori is not my definitely not my specialty. Christina Vera.
Black koji, it's called.
Oh, okay. So that's this black koji. So yeah, black koji can be used for sake brewing. It gives you different acids. I've had a couple sakes made with black koji, and it is pretty strong. And often it's used for sakes where they want to get very little residual sugar. So I had a sake that was like called the Zero. Yeah, Zero, and it had no residual. Like they fermented everything out of it, and the alcohol was there, and the like sharpness was there. So I think black koji is very strong. That's why you can make you can use it for the fermentation before the distillation in shochu and awamori, and for some sakes that you want that from. Yeah, it wasn't.
I feel like I've drunk that before in an Okinawan bar in Osaka.
Yeah,
I got very drunk that night, and I was singing a lot of songs and making me dance around the room.
You in an Okinawan bar or Okinawa itself. Yeah. Because it's kokuto, it's Japanese brown sugar is used, right? But Okinawa is a very new part of Japan. It's definitely more Polynesian in culture and influence. It's a very different.
They seem very fun people.
Yeah, very fun. Lots of dancing.
Lots of dancing and singing and folk songs and eating.
Yeah. Lots of
eating. I mean, everyone eats, but anyway, that's my Okinawan.
Yeah, it's like family and like big gatherings, that sort of thing, which is not very Japanese actually at all. Yeah. Yeah, Aspergillus oryzae, koji. So I put Aspergillus oryzae, but to Jonah's question, actually koji itself is considered the national fungus, koking, national fungus, and they don't specify if it's Aspergillus oryzae or not. It's like all koji, black, white, and yellow. So this should change probably. Yeah. So when we're talking about koji on its own, we're talking about koji king, which is the spores. So you can see in this photo here, the shapes of the rice or the grains themselves, that's not part of the koji. That's just the vessel that the powder, the spores are transported on, right? So the koji itself is the powder there. Yeah. Yeah, Japan has an official fungus, and sake is the national beverage, the national alcohol. More pictures of koji, Hideo again, Matsumoto-san there. On the left, under that microscope, is finished koji. So the steamed rice that has had the koji proliferate on it, it's grown on it. You can see that there's some darker specks in there, and that's the shinpaku, but also you can see the koji hyphae growing towards the inside where the moisture is. And the green photo on the far right, that is koji spores that you're going to sprinkle onto on like this. Yeah. This is Jukon, so Oni-san, who is a very lovely, makes some cult sakes. This is such
perfect
a yeah,
perfect.
Yeah. So like bright and juicy, but not over the top. Like, anyways, he makes some beautiful sakes. You can get it at Peter Pan. But he's sprinkling, you can see in the air there, that's the koji spores. Those are the koji spores that are being sprinkled onto the cooked steamed rice that is in this like bed looking thing there. So, and this room, like you can see that it's cedar walls in here too. And some places are cedar still, some places have come back to making their rooms cedar. Some places are like, they look like ER rooms or operating rooms. Some of them are stainless steel to make sure that it's really, really clean, and like, big production places would do that, right? But the whole point of any koji room, whether it's like mechanized and it's a machine making koji, or in the brewer making koji, is that it is controlled for humidity and for temperature. Okay, so usually we're getting about like close to 40 degrees Celsius. That's pretty hot even for Toronto, and it's quite humid. So the moment you go in, usually like my phone camera fogs up and my glasses are hard to see through because it is humid and hot. And the whole point here is that because koji, we're creating enzymes. So first and foremost, it is a mold. It grows better in this condition, right? So you want this warm, this very cozy environment so the koji can grow and create enzymes. So the hyphae that grows the feeding tubes, the roots that go through the rice that you can see, that is creating enzymes that break down proteins and starches. And this I've called the blueprint. So the koji making process, that the way you design your koji, how it functions, how long it's going to take for it to convert the starch into sugars. This is your roadmap, right? So the finish line, the goal is to create starches into sugars. To create sugars out of starch, and then for the yeast to make alcohol, right? So that's our finish line. But you have to have a blueprint, a goal in mind. This is the kind of sake I want to make, and in order to get there, this is the kind of koji that I'm going to make as well in order to get there. So if you don't have a map, or if you don't have like an idea of how you're going to get there, then it's just going to be like wild, which some brewers do too, right? They just make a koji that they've always been making, and let's see what it does. But there's a lot of precision and experience. That might not be science, but it would be like experience over all the generations. The picture in the middle here, I was at a koji supplier. And so there's like 5 companies in Japan that deal with just koji. They sell to brewers for sake, for miso, for all the fermentation places. And there's green koji, there's white, there's koji specifically for making amazake or for making, let's see, like if you want a very specifically high acid, or but this very specific acid, you can ask for a blend. So I want this kind of protein, this kind of acid with this kind of sugar with this kind of result. Then you can ask them to custom blend it. It's cool. It's like making your own custom, I don't know, like juice or smoothie is the only thing that comes to mind. And the picture on the left is finished koji. So this is koji, steamed rice that has had the koji spores grown on it for 48 hours. And this is our result. And this is partially what's going to be used in our main fermentation and our starter to get your fermentation going. Oni-san here is showing us one of his koji machines. It's not used for the entire process of koji making, but for some parts of the koji making, they use this contraption vessel to really fine tune and finely control what you get. So he uses a mix of like very, very hand done koji, handmade, and this. And it depends on the sake too. Top sakes wouldn't necessarily use this, most likely, but you do use a mix. Yeah. At first, the first time I saw this, he's like, "Don't take photos. It's a secret." Now everyone has them.
Another one with some wax paper. Yeah, definitely a trade secret.
Right? Can you imagine like who's watching?
Oh my god. I think he's safe. I don't think anyone's like going for the G-Con kind of like crown. I don't know. I think he's got it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if there is, please tell me so that I can like buy them.
This Mie, the sake that we have, the sake number 4 is from Mie as well, and he's considered like up there, not quite.
That was pretty cool sake. That was a really cool sake. I mean, we're about to drink it.
Yeah, we're gonna drink it. Various brewers have their own super secret koji? Yeah, like people will tell you. It's not gonna be like don't tell them. There's only 5 koji suppliers in Japan, and they supply everybody, right? Unless you make your own koji, and that's done but not common. I know there's people here on this call that do make koji, but it's pretty hard. Oh, sorry, I kind of mixed up my answer there. But you can make koji you have to first buy the koji spores, right? But Terada Honke in Chiba, that makes that really cloudy sake with like 100% brown rice sake, they make their own spores. So they're actually making the spores themselves and then using that to make koji, which is like what we're seeing in this process, for example. Yeah. So
they cultivate their own
the mold itself. The spores. Yeah. And like historically, the koji spores were found accidentally, as all things civilization, that they found some like browned or like black rice in the fields, and they decided to like try to
put it in their mouth.
Probably.
And I was like, oh, this is sweet. Yeah, that's exactly. Some weirdo puts a weird thing in their mouth and they go, oh, this is different. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't die, so it must be
exactly right. That's exactly how it goes.
That's kind of what happens in my fridge at home. Oh, this is fermenting longer than it should, but well, it's tasty. So so they found some black like specks on some rice in the fields, and then they like cultivated it, and that's how we found koji. So yeah, you can make it. I just don't. I imagine it's pretty difficult. Yeah. So Terada Honke, they do it. Living Vine just brought in a small amount, I think, of Terada Honke's like very cloudy sake. I think it's called, must be like rice ball. I'm not sure if that's the one they brought in, but it is pretty cloudy. So the number of hours that you would need for making koji is around 48 hours. You see some people go to like 50 plus, but 48 is the gold standard for approximately how long it takes. So for 48 hours, the koji is being cultivated, right? In this room, brewers, if they're hand making the koji, they're on like on alert every 2 hours, checking the temperature, mixing it, making sure that it doesn't go too hot. Because while the enzymes, while the koji is working, it's giving off heat, and if it goes too hot, then it'll die, right? So you can't let it go too hot either, but you need it at a good temperature so that the rate of growing is even and where you want it to be, right? And this also depends on the style of koji growth that you want. So Seoul has it, Ski has it. This is a little outside of this class for sure, but Seoul has it. You're growing a lot of koji all around the rice, and you typically use more koji so that you have a more vigorous koji growth pattern, and you're creating more sugars out of that, right? So you want to make a fuller bodied, sweeter, fatter sake. You would probably use a sohaze ish style of making it, and then tsukihaze you would make you would use very little koji spores, and you don't want it to melt or to create sugars, too much sugars. Yeah, a very generalized way of thinking about it is, if you make a daiginjo, most daiginjos, you don't want too much flavor and too much umami, because the more you melt the rice, the more proteins and fats you're going to get. So the daiginjos are typically very, very clean, less koji. And then the fatter junmais, like sake number 2, you want to create just more of like everything. So it all
depends. Sorry to interrupt. The texture of the rice changes during these 48 hours,
Yeah. So if you take even the koji that I bought from Izumi, if you take that finished koji, because I think you can ask them and they'll sell it to you. If you crush it, it becomes crumbly. Yeah.
So interesting.
The moisture leaves too, because this table in this photo, at the bottom of the legs, there's scales, and it shows you, well, it'll indicate how much moisture you've lost, or
that's interesting.
So there's
it looks like a different texture. It doesn't look like rice.
Yeah,
it looks
it's hard, but it crumbles because it needs to melt, right? Yeah, that's one part of the fermentation. Then you also do add just straight up steamed rice as well, but the koji rice is 20% of all the rice that you use, but it needs to do the most amount of work, because that 20-80 rule for everything. So it depends on the kind of sake we're trying to make, and it's an art, but with science and numbers to back it up. So yeah, here on the left is steamed rice, right? So you can see it's kind of crunchy, but it's gummy inside. So if you did this, it'd be squishy. And then on the right-hand side is the finished koji rice, not the koji spores, but it's the steamed rice that has had koji spores grown on it for 48 hours. And you can see it's more powdery looking on the surface even. Yeah, I got bringing 2 slides because it is not this easy, obviously, but we're going to talk about it really, really fast. And we talk more about it later. This is Aramasa's brewery, who is this very, very intellectual, smart man who makes some beautiful sakes. So all his tanks now, I think all are made out of cedar. Again, this very expensive, nice wood. So I've broken it down into the major steps. So rice preparation is where we talk about what we do with the rice. So getting it from the fields, the farms, into the brewery. Polishing, that can be done at the brewery or by someone else usually. You've got a company that does it for you and sends it to you at 70% or whatever. But after we get the rice, we have to wash it in order to get some of the powders off. We have to make it into the clean state. Okay? That rice gets soaked and then steamed, and it's not cooking, right? I sometimes use the word cook, which isn't quite accurate, but it's steaming. We're putting heat onto it, but we're steaming it, because the rice it doesn't come in contact with water. It's a very different way of preparing the rice than us eating rice on a day-to-day. So that's one step. And all these things, polishing often done somewhere else, washing, soaking, steaming that's done at the brewery. These are all specific things that brewers of different like personalities and different people will do differently, right? They'll use different equipment, different like accuracy. They'll say, well, washing is really important to us, that's why we do it by hand. And then someone else says washing is really important to us, which is why we do it by machine. They'll tell you all different things.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so it's the philosophy or the ideas can be similar, but the way they get there can be very, very different. Koji making, we talked about a little bit more before in the last few slides, but here it's all about creating the fuel that takes us to where we want to be, the kind of sake that we want to make, the kind of alcohol, the kind of flavor profile. That's the key. The fermentation starter is part of, now we're into the fermentation itself, but the starter and the main fermentation are two separate steps. Now you can skip the starter stage, like some sakes in Japan, but also like if Izumi in Toronto here, in the district, for their summer sake, they skip the starter stage and they just go directly into the main fermentation, and you get lower alcohol, right? But the reason why you get lower alcohol without creating a starter usually is that the whole goal of the starter is to use a smaller vessel, to use a smaller environment, less ingredients, but more concentration, so that we can create enough yeast at this stage so that when we dilute it more by adding more water, adding more rice, that we can have a safe fermentation. If we go straight into the main fermentation and you add everything together, it's a little risky because you've got higher amounts of water and it's just more diluted. But if we have the starter, it's like you're not practice, but you just have a little bit more concentration to make sure it's a security measure. Yeah. So kind of like if you're making something like you're baking with egg whites and you whip up the egg whites, you wouldn't put all the egg whites in your batter at once, right? Because it would deflate.
Yeah,
it's a different like thing, but you know what I mean. So you put a little bit in, mix it, and that way you can put in the rest of it. Yeah. Okay. So this is on the left, again, this is jikon. And so this is the rice steamer on the left. You can see the big vessel. On the bottom, there is a tube that connects to, the tube has steam that goes through it. And where she's shoveling, there's different layers of rice in there. So it's kind of like, it's like a big steaming basket. If you have a dim sum steaming basket that's stacked on top of another, on the bottom, you would have the less expensive, less polished rice, because that's where the wettest steam is. And then as you go up higher, the top rice would be the most expensive.
It feels very damp. Sake brewery is a damp place. Yeah. Everything feels very steamy and like wet. Like there's always like a wet cloth hanging over something. It's just
yeah.
It's just I've never been to a sake brewery. So from all your photos, everything just feels
damp and cloth. Yeah, it's amazing. There's not more.
It's like soft. There's lots of soft textures.
It's like we're doing it. It's surprising there's not more like faulty, weird. Like, but sometimes like with less. What's the word? Clean breweries. I can almost like taste the wetness in the sake. You know, even the pressing bags are like maybe they're not super clean, and then you can taste that in the sake. So yeah, it's amazing that jikon, even with like, or you know, whatever other clean producer is using wood and like steam and water and cloth. Yeah.
Right.
Pretty amazing. And Japan's a very humid place, right? Yeah. That's why you can, yeah. Anyways, on the right we have, so you can see the layers there. So they're peeling off the layer of rice that's on top, and then they go to the next one, and the next one, right?
There's like a cloth between it?
Yeah. Kind of like cheesecloth, but a little, harder than you'd imagine. Yeah. Okay, so brewing, and then we go into the main fermentation. So the starter fermentation, was all about getting your yeast to a healthy population, to have enough of it. And then your main fermentation here, we're doing the rest. So we're making alcohol, right? And we're making these esters and acids and things. The pressing process, it is to separate the solids from the liquid. It's often called filtration. I don't like the word filtration because you can also charcoal filter and do other things to make it clearer. But the whole point of this step is just to remove the rice solids. And so even in this photo here with the ice buckets, this mashiness, that's sake. To take out the rice is the pressing or the filtration step. So all sake starts out cloudy, nigori with chunks of rice in it. We have to remove that in order to make clear sake. Post-production includes all the decisions a brewer needs to make in order to finish the sake. Adding water, filtering, aging. Maybe you put like bubbles in it. So maybe you make sparkling sake. Maybe you put plums in it. That's a different thing. That's not sake actually. But all these other things that we do after the pressing, there's a lot that goes on there too. So pasteurizing is also part of this step. And these buckets that have the ice, this is in order to control the fermentation process. If your tank is getting too energetic and it's brewing too fast, and maybe you know you need like 10 more days of fermentation to make sure you have all your alcohols and sugars in place, you might try to slow it down by adding ice into these buckets, or you run a cooling liquid around your tank, right? Same way that other beverages are made. This is one type of pressing machine. So this is called Yabuta. It's just the name of the company that makes them. But a lot of breweries use some form of this horizontal press. And these pipes or these tubes at the top here, this is air. It's not the sake. But you can see better in the photo on the right that each of these slats or each of these sheets, there's a hole at the top and at the bottom here, and that's where the sake goes in and comes out of. So what goes in is cloudy, thick, chunky rice and sake and everything that comes from the tank. What comes out is clear sake. And then what remains is the rice solids, and they stay in each of these sheets. So each of these metal layers has a balloon, has like a rubber balloon that runs around it, or it's fitted with it. And the sake goes between the layer and the rubber, and it gets pressed into sheets. I have a picture later weeks, but don't get too concerned about this. This is just one way of pressing out the rice solids from the clear sake. And there's other methods as well. This is just a photo of Matsumoto again. It's very beautiful, very pretty.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, so much wood and lighting. So what are the steps that are choices versus things that we must do? They're the law. So must do fermentation, we have to make sake. Filtration, pressing, that step that I was saying to get the solids out, that is a must do. And bottling, you have to package it somehow. This bottling could also be like bag, can, technically. Could be a lot of things. Optional, things that we consider style choices that we can choose to do, adding alcohol, right, which gives us non-junmai sakes. So junmai sakes are not, junmai sakes have no added alcohol, so pure rice. Honjozo, we do add alcohol. Adding water is also optional. We can, that's done in order to lower the alcohol to kind of make it more palatable, depending on what you're going for. And pasteurization, we usually use heat to get it up to a certain temperature, and that prevents it from changing too much. So if you don't pasteurize, it's considered namasake, so raw sake, and they're juicy and flavorful often, but they do run the risk of changing quite quickly. So you have enzymes and things that are still volatile, and that might start up again. And when pasteurization is done, or it will also give you different terminology. Okay, is anything surprising? A lot of people go, oh, filtration pressing, but what about unfiltered sakes? So unfiltered sakes are cloud, like thick. There's still the raw form of the rice and the liquid and everything that's in there, right? And technically, that's actually not sake. There's another category called doburoku, which is usually around 6 to 7% alcohol and super thick. It's like eating cottage cheese, but depending on if we feel like cottage cheese or not, it's tastier. Yeah, no, not a cottage cheese person. Yeah, so all sake needs to be filtered to some degree. So we have to remove some of the solids in some matter, right? That's just a strange law that they created back in the day. So there's no such thing. It's a good multiple choice question usually that shows up, but there's no such thing.
For the quiz after
The quiz,
session
yeah.
4.
Yeah,
The
I would not
test.
do, but yeah, in like different certifications, there is no such thing as unfiltered sake. It is roughly filtered and makes the sake cloudy. So the question of when something is done, the adding alcohol, right, is done here. I put the word here today, I did that. So after fermentation, before pressing, that's when it's done. This slide is from before, so it should be familiar. And adding water, pasteurizing, filtering, aging, that happens post-production, so after. So that's here, right? So adding alcohol is not to fortify the sake itself, but it's to extract aromas and flavors, and it is always done after the fermentation. So fortification, the word is not correct. Some people use it, but it can be very confusing. So all we're looking for is a stylistic.
You're not really adding alcohol to increase the ABV to any high degree. It's like 1% or like a quarter, like 0.5% or something.
Yeah, and I mean, usually when you add the alcohol to get some of these stylistic effects, you're still probably going to dilute it with water to get to like 16, 17. You're going to like adjust it as well, right? So the adding of alcohol when we're talking about premium sake is really just all about style.
And sorry, one more question. So when you talk about genshu, it's post-production, not adding water?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, if it says genshu, original sake, like cask strength, then we're not adding any water at the end. Now, it gets tricky because you could add water in the middle and still call it genshu, which a lot of like modern brewers are doing right now. But genshu means there's no water added at the end, post-production. Is there legislation? Yeah, what is the alcohol that is added? It is from a grain usually, and it is usually imported. Very few places make their own. They can, but they don't. It's too expensive. And also brewers don't have distillation licenses usually, so they're prohibited from making spirit.
Yeah, it's like sugarcane syrup or spirits or beet syrups or something, whatever's.
Yeah, whatever's
That's
cheap.
kind of what it is. Yeah,
Whatever's South America often, and it is added not at I think it's added at like 35, 36% alcohol, but they purchase it usually at like much higher percentages, right? So not to fortify, not to increase the ABV, but to extract aromas and flavors. And here we talk about alcohol. What does it do when we add alcohol? We release esters. So esters are aromatic compounds. If you think about, if you've looked on your perfume or like, what's that called? Cologne, like scents, you'll see that alcohol is often an ingredient. And that's because alcohol will stabilize the aromatic compounds and make it last, right? If you get all natural perfumes, they can be lovely, but they're also like, it goes away really quickly. They're very faint. So alcohol stabilizes those aromatics. In the case of sake, it will also function to release esters and to get flavors. Some smells are only dissolvable in alcohol and not in water, right? Again, not fortification. On the palate, it can also make the sake drier. It can give structure. Sake number 1 is an added alcohol sake, so that we can see that like textural difference and that sharpness. Sometimes the adding alcohol really kind of gives it a bite or like a finish that some people like. This is a trophy, not a goblet that you drink out of, because a lot of sakes for competitions, trophy, hence the trophy, are added alcohol. Right, so by adding a little bit of alcohol before the pressing, you can get esters, you can aromatics and flavors that might not come through until much, much later or never. So when competitions are held, it's like June-ish, and sakes are usually done brewing in like March. So you don't have enough time for flavors to develop naturally often. So what brewers do instead is they add a little bit of alcohol in order to get it for like show ready. Yeah. So if you keep
sorry to interrupt. For people who don't know what esters are, they're like every essential oil, every artificial flavor, it's an ester. But the banana flavors you get, the grape flavor you get in gum, it's just a type of ester. So when you change how the ester looks, you change the aroma and the flavor that you get. So that's kind of when I learned this a long time ago, but ester equals flavor. That's just kind of how chemistry works.
I love like food scientists. Well, I love them. Yeah. Anyways, it's pretty amazing what they do, right? Because like if you buy Pocky and it's banana flavored, the amount of like banana essence in that is insane. It's like, wow, it's just like so fake that I'm always like inspired by it.
So this is the thing. This is an aside, everyone. So why artificial flavor, banana flavor tastes so different to what bananas taste like is that flavor was modeled on a banana that has since gone extinct. So, and so it was only in the 60s that when the Panama virus came and wiped out this species of banana, that we cultivated a new banana that's that tastes very different to the artificial banana we had. But in that world, that's what bananas tasted like in the first half of the 20th century. It's very strange.
They would have tasted amazing. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what bananas really tasted like. They were called the Gros Michel. And then they died out. And then the Cavendish is kind of, I think, the banana that everyone eats now because it's resistant to this virus.
They're like an extinction. I thought that maybe I read something about that, or corn. Yeah,
it's very strange. Anyway, that's flavor banana corner, guys.
So in sake, isoamyl acetate is an ester that is often you smell in sake, ginjo sakes, and one of the notes is banana that you will smell often, melon, other things. Yeah. Okay, so what happens when you add water? You lower the alcohol percentage, perhaps, makes it more palatable. Genshu, straight from the tank, like if we're drinking sake here, if you're at the brewery, is pretty full on. Like it's concentrated, it's like really tight knit often, and it takes a little bit of water, or it might take a little bit of time for it to mellow out and become more like together, right? But there is a difference between a good someone who's good at adding water, like knowing that balance and making it not too diluted, not too watery, and able to open it up. And so if you think about like when you drink spirits or whiskey at home, maybe you add a little, like a couple drops of water, it really makes you able to taste things, right? I actually have
definitely some whiskey lovers in the audience.
Oh yeah, okay. And I actually have a hard time drinking espresso straight because I find it too, like, for me, it's just so intense that I need a little bit of. I don't drink espressos. Yeah, I know you do. You always get.
Because I work in a restaurant, and when I need the caffeine in like 4.5 seconds, I'm like, nope, and then I'm back on the floor.
That's fair. Yeah, that's why the Italians with their like cigarettes and espresso buy. Oh. So yeah, watery versus dilution. This is a big topic in scale. The current young producers, they are doing lower alcohol genshu. I think I mentioned this, so 13% alcohol, but that's what it finishes at, and that's really a big thing right now. Yeah. What heat? So heat is the main way that pasteurization is done. We want to get the sake to 65 degrees Celsius and keep it there for how many ever minutes, depending on the brewer and the sake. But that part is important, because if you don't do it long enough, you get kind of like a half-assed pasteurization that tastes kind of like wet rag after a while. So clearly, I guess that would be a fault. But yeah, you need to be able to time this very well, right? So hot water bath is like the most kind of primitive way. You can use a pasteurizer, basically the pasteurizer, and it's a shower method where the bottles go through a conveyor belt, but there's different settings of water that is showered on the bottles. Canned fish, I'll show you later. Filtration with charcoal, you can take out a lot or take out just a little bit. You can use things like membrane filter, centrifuge. That's uses a centrifugal centrifuge in order to separate the sake kasu out of the sake. Whether we're talking about filtration, when we're talking about all these methods, the goal is we can remove some color, we can take a little eraser to the curves, or we can do it so that we take out a lot of flavor and get a very, very neutral sake. So it depends on what your goals are. On the left here, you can see that the sake is not clear. It's a little greenish, and that is the original color of the sake, usually. And that needs to be, there's a lot that happens to the sake before it becomes water white, if that's what it becomes. The middle picture is pasteurization at Izumi in Toronto in the distillery district. So they take freshly pressed sake, put it into bottles, into this bath, fill it with cold water, and then it gets the water gets heated so that the sake's content, the inside, is 65 degrees for 90. I think it's like 10 minutes there. Yeah. And on the far right, we have a fish canning machine that was discovered. This brewery in Akita called Taiheisan, they saw this fish canning machine and they thought, oh, maybe we can use that to flash pasteurize our sakes, because the shorter that your sake is heated, the more fresh it's going to stay, right? We need to do it for the minimum amount of time to make sure that your enzymes and like yeasts are not active anymore. But if you can do it as quickly as possible and cool it down as quickly as possible, we get a better tasting sake. And so they use, for one of their sakes, they're trying out that machine. I'm thirsty. Everyone must be thirsty. This first day is always like a lot of talking. Well, it's always a lot of talking.
She says that she drinks water. You can't be that thirsty if you're just drinking water.
I'm drinking, yeah. I will drink more sake. So if everyone doesn't yet have their sakes in front of them, we can go get them. And you can get 4 glasses if you like. You can get 1 or 2 depending on your situation, spittoon or not. That's very up to you.
There's no judgment here. If you don't want to, like, if you need to spit out, do it. You know, I mean, we can't see what you're doing. You don't even have to drink your sakes right now. You could drink them in a week.
Yeah, you can drink them tomorrow.
I didn't label the order of sakes.
Yeah. Well, we can read them. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, you just got to tell them what sake they're drinking first.
So it all says session 1 for tonight, right? And then I'll go through each of the sakes. The first one is going to be I'll flip forward first. Kirakusho.
Oh, good. Whew. Yeah. Everyone kept asking me, and I was like, I'm pretty sure Kirakusho Honjo first. Yeah, great.
So Kirakusho is number 1, okay? But let's talk about tasting first. If you want to pour that into your glass so that you can, through this tasting with that might be good. Okay. So when we're tasting sake, it is very similar to a wine tasting if you've done that, or whatever you taste, right? Like the principles are very similar. We're looking for these 3 things, whatever you're tasting: appearance, aroma, and palate. you might use a different vessel. You might use, yeah, a different vessel, but you were looking for the same things. In terms of appearance, the color, the intensity, and the clarity of the three C's can tell you a lot about the sake, but it also doesn't tell you a whole lot, right? With wine, I feel like, yeah, I feel like wine, there's more to say with, like, the age. Yes, some color can give you some clues about, like, the age, what state it's in, or maybe it was not charcoal filtered, or it was. But beyond that, there's not that much. And if you ever take WSET sake, then like, for points, you don't get that many points for appearance. Wine too, right? I think it's like 2 points for level 3 even.
Yeah.
Okay, but this sake, you can see that it is clear. The color, I don't think it's water. It's not water white, but it's pretty close to it.
Close. It's really close.
It's pretty close, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So you can
Got
tell.
like a slight yellow, like, hue.
Yeah. But
why am I engaging in this crazy, like, this sake? It's amazing. It's like I'm trying to, like, figure out the color of sake. It's kind of like pale straw.
Yeah, pale straw. Yeah. And by the time we get to, like, lemon or gold, we're talking about some pretty like, age maybe would be the big thing. Yeah. So yeah, appearance, look at it. If it's cloudy, if it's bubbly, of course that will give you more hints as well. That's more obvious. If it's levels of cloudy, it can be white cloudy, it can be gray, it can be brown cloudy. That sounds kind of gross, but it could be. And like how chunky it is. Nigoris go everywhere from, like, through super chunky, like I was saying earlier, to very, very light, right? So you can make note of that if you want.
I just figured what this photo is. It's like someone drinking a sake, and then you've taken there's a photo of the bottle.
I'm glad. This is my former roommate, Olivia, who lives in Vancouver now. We went to New York. Sakamai is a great sake bar. And yeah, I needed a photo. So I'm like, Olivia, pretend you're drinking.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, now I know where to go when I go to New York and go, oh, I'm going to go to this place.
Yeah, some great sake bars in New York. Okay, aroma. So aroma intensity, the aroma characteristics, and the two big camps that we break sake into for aroma and flavor are cereal, lactic, and then fruity or ginjo notes, right? So cereal, lactic, grainy, like ricey, steamed oats, steamed rice. What else? Those kinds of, like, grain-based notes. And then we can have some, like, cheesy notes as well. And then the fruity side, which are kind of all in that ginjo world. So melon, banana, pineapple, those tree fruit being apple, pear, and then tropical fruits. Yeah, those would be the big camps that we'll go through later. And then palate, so aroma intensity, aroma characteristics are separate things, right? We can have banana that's really intense or very light. Yeah. Palate, flavor intensity, again, the characteristics, and then we can note things like sweetness, acidity, finish, complexity, length. A couple things about the palate, or even the nose, I suppose, is that a short sake, so a very, like, not a long finish on a sake, it doesn't necessarily say it's not a good sake. It's just maybe a simple or a short sake. Yeah. In terms of quality, or like assessing for quality, there's a lot of different camps of people, who believe this or that. I would say that if it's balanced and you like it, that's probably kind of all that matters. There's a lot of interesting sakes out there in Toronto and Canada, and yeah, I think the stories and what makes them interesting is more crucial at this point. No. Okay, so the first sake.
Go get your sakes, everyone. If you haven't got your sake yet, you got your 30 seconds.
Yeah, you do have 3 seconds. So Kirakucho is a brewery. Oh yeah, where's your map?
Oh, map. Wait, chef. Actually, I'm organized. I'm not that unorganized. Yes. I gotta zoom in.
Hey. So yeah, we're kind of tight in
we're very tight, but in a good way.
Yeah.
We're tight because this, like, in a good way, because this is my favorite region of where all my favorite sakes live in this region.
Yeah, that's true actually. There's a lot going on.
We're in Shiga.
So we're in Shiga on the Kirakusho Honjozo, not Junmai, just Honjozo, session 1, right? And so Shiga is home to Lake Biwa, which is the largest freshwater lake in Japan, and it's pretty small because we live in Canada. Everything seems smaller than us, but it's a very important place. Biwako, Lake Biwa, is where funazushi was invented. So the origins of sushi came from Shiga. So they would take fish from Lake Biwa, and they would ferment it in rice, and that is what became that is the way of preserving fish that was taken from or borrowed from China, and we have our form, the current form of sushi now, but that's how it started. Yeah. So from Shiga, Kirakusho, the characters stand for happy, long life. So you drink more sake and you have a happy, long life. This is the Honjozo. So this is, and we go through more of the details later, but this is an added alcohol style. And if you're going to have multiple glasses, the first two sakes, so this and the Kagatobi Junmai, will be the two to compare side by side. Kirakusho, Honjozo, added alcohol, right? So it has to be polished to at least 70%. This is 65%, a little extra. And here again, they've added the alcohol right before pressing. And if you pour sake number 2, which I guess I have to show you, sorry, Kagatobi is sake number 2. I think Dan might be the only person who doesn't have the sakes, but if you compare the added alcohol versus the Junmai, any Junmai, you should see the kind of difference in aromatics and the texture. Okay, so before we talk too much about sake number 2, this one, now if you compare the first one, Kirakusho shows the way like the nose really kind of wafts up versus this one. I mean, first of all, it has a lot more like earthiness. It smells like kind of like soy sauce, dashi. But especially on the palate, this one is like denser and thicker and more bottom noted, whereas Kirakusho's Honjozo, the added alcohol one, is like thinner, it's more top, it's like boozy is not quite what I'm trying to say, but it's a little thinner, I think. And you get that alcohol esteriness compared to the second sake. So the second sake, there's more umami, there's more acidity because we have an added alcohol. There's more the riciness and the umami of the rice still there. So adding alcohol, you can get more esters and more flavors sometimes, but you can also take away the umami and the acidity that you get. Yeah. So yeah, sake number 2, thank you, is the Kagatobi Gokkan Junmai. And this is from Ishikawa. So Ishikawa, this whole like peninsula plus the bottom part is now Ishikawa. But the top part, Noto Hanto, the Noto Peninsula, where Hoon, who's here, was supposed to, and Hoon and Min were supposed to go there in 2020. But this is where instead of soy sauce, they would use fish sauce. And the food there is a lot thicker and richer. And the sake from that region is can be sweeter, can be drier, but anyways, it's like a thicker style of sake from the Noto Guild. And that style of brewing from the Noto Guild was brought down to Shiga over here because the fishermen and the farmers from Ishikawa, who in the winter would not be fishing or farming, they would come down to Shiga to make sake. That style migrated over from Ishikawa down to, or Noto, to this region. right? So you would get that kind of like human geography or the migration. No, they weren't living there, so maybe not migration, but cultural migration, maybe flavor migration. So the two, again, what we want to talk about with the comparison of these two sakes is the textural difference, is um, the thinness of number one, I think is a big part of it for me. What do you think, Nick? Do you like, I mean, I love Kirakucho.
So. Oh, absolutely. And I'm never going to say it's not like, I think, and I would say getting a handle on Honjozo to what a junmai is, like, this is a really, tasting 1 and 2 together is a really good way to like understand sort of the styles you prefer in a really generalized way. Because, and I think, you know, the junmai, there's so much more rice to it and so much more, like this, like earthiness, which is interesting. But I would also say that like they both share this really like very saline, very salinity dominated textural, and I think you get that more from the Honjozo. They're like that salinity, that mineralness from it. So, but you can kind of see that cultural kind of influence.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And Kirakucho is not on the coast, like it's inside, right? There's no coastline, but because the toji here is noto toji, it's from the West Coast style. You see that, I think, influence a lot in where they are. And this is a sake that the brewers say that they drink the most, right? When they're drinking at the brewery or they're having parties, this is what they drink. And Mayako-san, who's like the next generation, sees the 6th generation and like barely in her 30s now, she's taken over. And she's this like super cute, very, very capable brewer, but she's making more like stylish labels and like more modern, slightly more modern styles now. But this is the one that she even falls, but like goes back to all the time. She was really surprised that I liked it so much. She's like, yeah, I got it. You like the sake.
I mean, this is the one we poured by the glass at Peter Pan while we were open for those like 10 days. And it's, you know, it is super approachable because we'll be tasting some very like iconic, like very specific sakes, and like that the Honjozo represents very much a like everyday sake that I can have and not overthink it, not feel guilty for like not like writing notes about it and things like that. Like, and I think that's a really important thing, is that, and this is my journey as well, is that, you know, the first Hakko Gakko, we tasted so much sake, and I didn't have any like way to just like drink sake without having to intellectualize it and like just enjoy it and just like go, oh, it's Tuesday, it's Monday, I just want a glass of sake. I don't want to have to like feel guilty for pouring it or not like taking it seriously and just like slurping it down. And for me, this is kind of, the first sake is kind of, that's what it does for me. It's very satisfying in that way.
It's like drinking a really like perfect Pilsner, you know, just like starting with that, you know. Yeah.
And it's not to diminish it. It's just to recognize that we all have wines that we enjoy every day, and there are wines that we have to think and ponder, and we focus more on.
Yeah.
We make a bit more of a special occasion, and you know.
And these are the
when you taste a lot of sakes all at the same time, you may not understand where they sit in that kind of spectrum.
Yeah, and we're so like used to talking about these like big stories and like, you know, layered complex sakes, but this is the one that like I always fall back to. And technically, like whether it's a Pilsner or, you know, good Honjozo, they're much harder to do well, actually, right? Like with your temperature controls and your yeast and things, like it's actually harder than a big something, to be that like precise. So this is using Yamada Nishiki rice and then Nihonbare. If you see two rice varieties, usually the one that's first, the one that's first is the koji rice, and the Nihonbare, the second one is going to be the rest of the fermentation, the additions that go into it. 65% polish, and the yeast here is 14. I wrote ish because so yeast number 14, we talk later. It's from Kanazawa, from Ishikawa, where sake number 2 is from. So that's the regional yeast of that area. But the current form of yeast number 14 is extremely aromatic, and actually sake number 4 is yeast number 14, like in its current form. But 14, like, I don't know, 50 years ago, wasn't this aromatic. So this brewery used 14 that they bought from the brewers back in the day. And they kept it, and they so this is their version of number 14. That's why I wrote ish. So it's their proprietary yeast, but it's based off number 14, which also I just realized explains the Noto Toji connection. Because Ishikawa yeast number 14 is Ishikawa yeast, which is Noto Guild, right? And they're using this yeast here, but it's evolved in a different way than what you can buy from the association now.
And if there are people out there going, what does ish mean? And like, how confused, like there's always exceptions to all the rules, even in wine, you know? So like, as much as I'm speaking to like the wine drinkers and the wine professionals here, like you just have to please just accept the ishes and the exceptions to the rules, because it's the same way with wine. There are always like, there's no hard and fast rules. You have to kind of like interpret, understand that it's this flexible, like evolving art form.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there's a lot more issues in sake than wine, because there's so many fewer rules and regulations, which, you know, wine people probably like, sometimes that's harder, but the same way that there's like Vanda tablas or that are like breaking the rules now. Not breaking, but they've become that wine because they've broken the rules. That's the same thing for sake, where people are like, I'm not writing Honjozo, I'm not writing yeast number 14 because I don't want to, you know?
Absolutely.
Really clean, just like super sessionable, lovely sake. And then the second one, the Kagatobi, this is the Junmai. It's Yamada Nishiki rice as the koji rice. They don't say, but I'm pretty sure that the kake rice is table rice, some sort of local one. And this is from Ishikawa. So the southern part of Ishikawa Prefecture is the old like Kaga area. The top part, the peninsula, that's the Noto part. They used to be two different like lords at that time. Oop. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
This bit and then this bit.
Yeah, and Mount Haku, like on the little yellow mountain.
I call it Mount Haku because it's my favorite character in the Studio Ghibli universe. Is Haku, but that's from Spirited Away. But my one takeaway from Mount Haku is, and this region, is that like some of like very important and very iconic sake breweries all are influenced by this, are in Ishikawa, right? Like Tengomai, like Tudoragawa, like these extremely like important breweries. And it is a very, it is a very important place for me, I think, for sake, and like a style of sake that is very relevant and very like iconic.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was a very prosperous place, especially the southern part. The northern part was more fishermen and farms, but then the southern part of Ishikawa, close to Kaga, lots of like lords and like castles and, you know, geisha culture, because it was a very thriving, I believe, like politically, but also like culturally important, significant place. So yeah, we've got like a great little area of amazing breweries and food and all sorts of things. Yeah. Okay, so Let me go back to my slide.
Sorry, we have to keep swapping it over.
You have the Jinmai, so that textural difference of like that sharp. Dan, I think Dan has a different sake because in Edmonton, but hopefully, even if the Jikon's not showing great, that the textural difference between an added alcohol and Jinmai is still there to compare and contrast those. Yeah. Okay, sake number 3 is Wakatake. It says Wakatake Junmai Ginjo. Okay, and yeah, this is a fun bottle. Pete was saying that it's very Art Deco, right?
Very much so, and it is the common name for this wine for this sake is like one of my favorite animes currently. So I'm not going to like say it, but like that's also why I really enjoy it.
So Wakatake is the sake brand name, and then the brewery is, what is the brewery name again?
It's actually I've spent a lot of time looking up this sake brew because it is so small and no Omurayo. So yeah, Omura.
Yeah. So and the Onikoroshi means demon slayer. Yeah. It's a good name. I didn't put
which is my favorite, which is one of my favorites. One of my favorite animes.
There's a few Demon Slayer sakes in Japan because that was like a common brand name, I guess, in a way to say that this is a dry sake. And I saw on Tipsy Sake, it's like an e-commerce sake site in the US. One of the people I feel like I know who wrote it was like, this can't kill a demon because it's so soft and lovely or something like that. That's cute. But Onigoroshi apparently was the name that they revived after generations of not using this name. But it's the oldest brewery in Shizuoka, which is where Mount Fuji is. It's just like south of Tokyo. And the Shizuoka style is this, like, it could be a little sharper sometimes, but this ginjo like lift and aromatics, you almost sometimes wonder if the Shizuoka sakes are added alcohol, even when they're junmai, because they have like a huge sharpness and lift that is Shizuoka. Yeah. And before people like start wondering why that's Shizuoka, one of the reasons why this is the style is because prefecturally they apparently decided that this was going to be their thing. So one of the sake instructors from the taxation office was sent here, and he was like an instructor of brewing. The government had a lot of reason to help brewers because they wanted more taxes, right? But that's how like the techniques and technology in sake developed in advance because the government was wanting more money. So I guess it's good and kind of weird too. But so the Shizuoka style is across the board, not everybody, but most people in Shizuoka is this sharp cleanness. And I remember very distinctively, I went into one brewery in Shizuoka and I was like, oh, where's the koji room? Because it was so not humid and not hot. It was dry. And that's because the koji room is set that way so that the koji spores don't grow very vigorously, right? And if you don't have that much koji growth, that means you don't have that much sugars being created, which means that you have a tighter, like more restrained sake. So you don't get super flavorful Shizuoka sakes typically. And so this, even though we're not talking about originality today, this is very much a regional character. And the point
very smooth sake, like it's very mellow, like it doesn't have that like intense minerality that Ishikawa and Ishiga kind of have, that Nodo style, which I'm learning to like move through. I'm moving past that terminology, but
I think most people understand. But this was an example of ginjo. So ginjo being the rice polish does have to be 60 or lower. But more importantly, ginjo style means that it's going to be aromatic and like pretty melon, apple, pear, lychee, licorice. Yeah, those notes, floral notes. So if you find a sake that's supposed to be ginjo and it's not showing those kind of floral notes and fruity, then there's probably something going on there. Yeah. Okay.
The other thing I learned from this was that like this sake brewery was upon the Tokaido Trail, so it had like this very ancient like pilgrimage kind of feel to it. It had a very like, I don't know, hallowed place within, I don't know, Japanese history.
Right? Yeah, Tokaido, the Eastern Ocean. Yeah, there's like a pilgrimage route that goes. I know a few people who have done it, and
it's a board game. So
right?
Steve and Mandy, who may be watching right now, it's a very famous board game, and it is based upon traveling the Tokaido Trail, where you kind of like go from like the bottom. I don't know where you go from, but
but it's a long walk.
yeah, it's a long walk, but it's also very like, you know, a spiritual kind of moment. And so it has a lot of like people have a reverence for this sake, I guess, from this town. But also, it's like 6 people work in this brewery, and it took me like, I guess, 90 minutes to find the location of where this place where this sake brewery exists in the world. It's Google Maps doesn't do well with like explaining where sake breweries exist.
They're often like really rural, right? Some like the second sake, Fukumitsuya, is in the center of Kanazawa City, but that's really rare because they're usually in like the boonies of Japan. But this is the Wakatake, the Demon Slayer. This is the oldest brewery in Shizuoka, and Shizuoka is where Mount Fuji is. All the, not all, but a lot of great tea comes from, oranges. So a very what's that word? Like very great place for farming, agriculture. You can imagine. Very. Anyways, yeah. Very clean, very fresh. So someone wrote online, I think the agent, this is Ozawa, someone wrote raw silk. And I was like, oh, what does raw silk?
That classic raw silk flavor that we all want in our beverages. Yeah, absolutely.
Raw silk.
I just love the bottle. It's a very iconic thing. I don't know what I'll ever do with it, but I kept all the bottles that we had. So in the hopes that maybe one day I'll pour something from it. But
water, yeah.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, a water bottle, right? That'll work. Yeah. Okay. Last sake, oh, what a fuzzy photo, sorry, is Zaku. And this is called Hono Tomo.
No, I was saying it's Zaku. It's a great name. It's a great name.
It is. So the Zaku is a pretty, in the last 5-ish years, they've become really, really famous. And there's like a lot of mystique around there where they just like kind of name things. Oh, this is Goyaku Mangoku. I forgot to take that out. So this is not Goyaku Mangoku rice. It did not say. With some research, it looks like it is a table rice that they use. Anyway, Zaku, they make aromatic sakes, and they are very, I would say they're pretty characteristically modern style. So this is Kanazawa East number 14. I didn't write ish because this is very Kanazawa East number 14. It's aromatic, it's lower acidity, and the aromatic sakes, you get a lot of these esters, but you do not get very strong fermentation, and as a result, you don't get as much acidity. So really pretty on the nose. Like I think Dan mentioned watermelon as a note that you get sometimes maybe too much of, but this maybe more pineapple, no, watermelon, yeah. Some of those like peach pear notes come through for me. It's not a very sharp sake or very super expressive, but it definitely ginjo style. And this is only rated as a Jinmai sake, but It is very aromatic and very ginjo style. So this is where I wanted to really show why a junmai sake, especially nowadays, right now, does not have to be like sake number 2, like earthy and structured and high acidity. This is a junmai, but it performs, or it's brewed more like junmai ginjo, right? So yeast number 14, considered a ginjo yeast, and you get those ginjo notes of melon and fruit. Yeah, polish is 60%, and honotomo. Ho is the rice ears, so it's the friend of the rice ears. Yeah, so it's really meant to taste like the rice that it's made of, but surprisingly, they don't tell you what rice it is. Yeah, quite aromatic, right? Zaku. And sweet. Not as much acidity, but like just so easy drinking. This like chilled on the patio is, I think where it belongs. And this is mie. So jikon is a mie. Zaku is like a very also another cult producer.
And not to flex, but I'm tasting Jikon and Zaku side by side. And I definitely do. There are similarities. And that's super interesting because I've never tasted two sakes from Mia before. So I was curious to taste them side by side to see if like terroir, whatever, any similarities, because I do like Ishikawa. I definitely get the same. There's some like commonalities between it. So I was just curious.
Mia's really like curious for me because to flex, Rachel like that comment. Yeah, but yeah, so Mia's kind of tough because you don't get like strong regional like styles, I think, but with these two you definitely see that like flora. Oh well, now it's very aromatic. I said something about not being expressive, like super ripe melon now. Yeah, pineapple's another one. I remember judging at the tasting, and one of the older, like very, very OG judges there, who is a big deal in sake, but he was like, "Oh, this ginjo smells like pineapple. Oh, this next ginjo smells like canned pineapple. Oh, and this one tastes like pineapple jam." So he hated them all.
He just doesn't like pineapple. What does quick question? What does honotomo mean in the Zaku?
Whole is the rice ears, like the grain. Well, the ears.
Can I explain this? Was I just out when I was out?
It's the friend of the rice ears.
No. I will look it up myself.
But all their sakes say that something tomo. So it's like
they definitely say tomo. There's a lot of like, and this is a thing you'll understand with. I've definitely come to term, like had to understand with sake, is that a brewery name isn't necessarily the brand name, and the brand name isn't necessarily within the brand name. Then there's different categories of it, and I'm not trying to like. I don't care how they structure their naming protocols, but it is something you have to understand. Is that like sometimes the name of the brewery isn't necessarily the name that you would recognize. Like Jikon is a brand within a sake.
Yeah, so
within a sake brewery. And you just have to like be able to pass that and understand that some of them are synonymous with each other. It's just
it's kind of confusing, really.
It is what it is, but like I'm not saying like if you understand that you have to like see through that, it's not necessarily confusing. You just have to like, work through that. Like, and don't get so hung up on like having every sake. It doesn't equate to wine. The naming conventions aren't the same as wine. So like just,
yeah. It is tough one, and like that's why if you're making lists or if you're making a menu, like Tengumai Tengumai, for example, that's not the brewery name. The brewery name is Shata Brewery, which is the name of the family that runs it. So yeah, those are like good questions, right? I've seen lists in like New York that only have the brand name Yeah, but then I know like this one brewery, there's two breweries that have the same brand name, for example. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah, there's a few Matsumoto's around and I get very confused, but I figure it out.
Someone
Dan
asked
says something in Japanese that I don't understand, and I'm very curious.
Friend of book? Are you a friend of book? Like real friend? I'm not quite sure. Sounds the same. Oh, okay. Hono, ho, not hon, but ho is like just ho instead of hon. Yeah. Anything grassy? Yeah, there's some kind of herbaceous, grassy sakes out there. It can be from the rice. Often from the rice, I think you'll get some grassy notes there. So yeah,
Absolutely.
the four sakes, right? A honjozo, junmai, sorry. So the added alcohol versus the not alcohol added alcohol, the junmai. The third sake is a ginjo, with the aromatics, the fruitiness, the floralness. And then the fourth sake is this very modern style that uses a modern yeast, number 14 in its like current form. And you see the kind of the lots of aromatics, but not so much acidity and not as much depth or yeah. But you get that sweetness of the rice, and it's very easy drinking, right? I do have like a couple more slides. I'll do them kind of fast so that we can do them for the next one. So what is Ginjo, right? So I wanted to talk about this part. The characters themselves, the first one, the second part of this character this word means to brew, the fermentation. The first one means to examine or to filter down to its true meaning, very philosophical. I have a bottle of soy sauce that it says ginsen, so it's like it's selected the finest soybeans, I guess. But that's what the characters mean. The polish, which is only one part of the equation, but it is important, is 60% or less. And the style, you get these fruity notes, you get florality, you get like just the general fruitiness. Yeah, these are the ones that kind of are closest to like a fruity white wine, usually. And how do we do it? Just going through these rather quickly. If we're choosing the rice, what rice we choose, what kind of polishing we do, how long we soak it for. One example, if you soak the rice longer and absorbs more water, when you steam it and then also make koji with it, the koji is gonna grow more actively, right? Because the mold likes moisture. And if you do that, you get more sugar, and then you get more alcohol and more flavor. Fermentation, I think this probably makes sense to beer people. We do cold temperature fermentation for ginjo, and the yeast that we use is a specific ginjo yeast. So you can get even from brewers, brewing supply stores, you can get yeast number 7 or 9, I believe, pretty easily in Canada. And yeast number 9, for example, would be a ginjo yeast, 14 as well, but 9 is the like classic ginjo yeast. Whereas masumi yeast is number 7, and that's your Jinmai yeast. That's what
Aramasa is number 6.
Yes, Aramasa uses only number 6. Yeah,
and the numbers represent when it was categorized, the time, the date. It doesn't necessarily mean anything other than that. So like, just when you see the numbers and you hear the numbers, it's like, it tends to be like maybe an older style. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. It's like,
the lower the number, the older.
Like it was recognized and like identified older. Masumi is a very famous yeast, number 7. You said 7.
Yeah, Masumi yeast number 7.
Aramasa loves, and it's funny. In the wine world, you don't often see we don't talk about yeasts as often, but like from a cultivation kind of standpoint. But I love that part of sake is that like there is this, like they understand that there is yeasts to suit the sake that they want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not like, it's not to be clinical about it, but it comes, what I've come to understand in my very limited amount of sake experience is that like it comes from a mastery of every element that is involved in sake, from the water to the rice to the yeast to how you serve it, how you brew it, how you age it, everything. In sake, you see this like mastery of every element that I've really never seen in wine to that degree. And so when we talk about when I talk about specifics in sake, what I see is this like passion to like understand the nuances. It's not to be like clinical and formulaic and like industrial about it. It's to be super passionate about exactly what yeast number 6 does to our sake as opposed to yeast number 7 or yeast number 9. It's crazy. Yeah. But maybe only yeast people understand that, and there are some yeast people in the audience, so maybe they will understand that more than maybe I'm pretty.
But so that's it's a good connection actually with beer again. Like if you have top yeast and bottom top. Anyways, they have different yeast and different temperatures that they perform better at for if you're making lagers versus ales. That's another thing why I think sake brewing, a lot of beer brewers like to venture into. They're like, oh, we've done this before. We kind of get it, So you get a lot of beer people making sake at home. But they've been cultivated and selected for different purposes, and that's where the numbers come in. So yeast number 6 is the oldest widely used yeast there is, and that's called Aramasa yeast as well, because that's where it was found. 7 must mean 9. But everyone has different versions of those yeast now. That's why I said ish for 14-ish. Steve, number 2 has a very caramelized aroma. So yeah, sake number 2 would have been fermented at not as cold temperatures because it's not a ginjo. So the higher temperatures probably for the fermentation itself. And that's not the reason why the sugars are there. It wouldn't be that hot. It would be more from the aging and the Maillard reaction that would take place from the aging process. In terms of quality, all 4 of these are good. Like they're very, very good examples, I think. That's why I chose them. Yeah. Zaku is probably the most like internationally known out of these. The last one, sake number 4, is like, really, really like Instagrammable, if you will. Yeah.
Instagrammable yeast. Oh, that's I've never heard you say that. I'm gonna like play you. Sorry, to quickly go. I just posted on Instagram on the chat. Really good my reference point for yeasts and rice, and they're really good at Japanese bar. There's a whole other section on yeasts that you can like understand the history and where it comes from, because you have to kind of put it all in perspective. So yeast is the coolest microbe in the world. So we'll go from there. But where can we purchase these sakes? Jonathan's asking. Oh my God, that's a big question, because I have 0 of these sakes.
Good one. We don't sell them at the bottom.
Yeah, Honcho's there. But maybe in a pouch. I'll put it in a pouch for people if you want to like buy a glass of it or something, because I only have the Ishibons. So they're like the 1.8 liters.
Yeah.
Of the but
you have to have more sake shops, because seriously, a lot of Japanese restaurants aren't doing that, and none of these are available at the LCBO, which is good for us because it's fun, but also hard to get if you want. Yeah.
What I'm going to do, I'll email everyone the list of the sakes we have. If you Google it, there's a good chance it'll come up on someone's like search engine.
Yeah. or just let me know, like message me, DM me, and then I'll let you know where they could be found. And I'm about to get a delivery of a very large
That's
fridge.
large ones, yeah. The honjozos,
Yeah,
the
pretty
that's
sure
life
you
one.
are. Yeah. So we're about to get a very large door, 2-door fridge at the regular Wednesday. So I'm gonna
Really?
fill it with 30 sakes. Well, that's about, yeah, hopefully 30. The 30
Oh,
door.
oh, that's wonderful. Because I
Mm.
bought that fancy I bought that fancy bird sake, and
Yeah, yeah.
then I realized it was a Daginjo, and I was a little
No,
bit
it's a ginjo, but yeah. Uh,
sad.
well, there's something I was gonna say. Oh yeah, someone said food pairings. I didn't have very specific things, but if you, I think I said to Nick, like just in a text message, if you got pickles, for example, or cheese, the whole goal is to like try things with everything you're having. I think someone, who was it? Someone said pickles. I like number 3 with sweet pickle, Japheth. Okay, yeah. The whole goal is to try different things with different flavors, and in session number 4 we talk very specifically about pairings, but I would see how like acid, I said cucumber rolls with soy sauce, and then you add lemon to that to see how that acid plays with the soy, or the soy saltiness and umami, right? Sake number 1, the honjozo, the added alcohol, I find, well, everyone says, not just me, goes well with acid and like vinegar. So that's one that I liked with salt and vinegar chips, because I like chips. And then when we get to the more fruity styles like sake number 4, because there's less acid and it's more floral, I would suggest with probably like lighter dishes, or maybe like something that has that florality. Right, so just play with like the contrast and the similarities, and I think you'll find what you like.
Are all of these four sakes like relative in quality level or like price point? Yeah, like we don't want to be people be tasting the honjozo that's like $200 a bottle compared to
Yeah,
Haku,
right.
which is maybe $50 a bottle or something like that.
Yeah, I mean the great thing about honjozos these days is some, like I feel, I'm gonna make myself a new title called the Honjozo Hunter. But like a good Honjozo is just so delicious. Like it's just what you want
I'm
to eat all the
putting
time.
this in my phone absolutely right now.
Yeah, because the good honjozos are just so amazing. Okay, I have a customer in Edmonton who buys for everything wine. It's a huge like chain, but Chris there is just so passionate, and he has a whole section of honjozo. And we were just like nerding out about how good honjozos are, like the next thing. And but they're just good producers making good honjozo. That's where I think it's such a great place. So I was really happy you chose that for your by the glass. But honjozos also are
You
not going to
you
be.
told me to
I tell you to buy it. Oh, all
no,
right.
you didn't tell me to buy it, but
Yeah.
no. But you said like how great you believed in this brewery,
Mm,
and from Hakko Gakko, and like it's also a company that's run by is influenced by a female like koji maker, koji master, and like president of the brewery. Like
yeah.
as much as like that doesn't represent anything quality, that it does represent something societally to me, and like
Mm,
definitely my team represent like love the fact that there is like a female in a leadership position in this brewery, and
it's so
not
uncommon.
only like running the company but also like making the koji, which is such a big part of what defines a sake.
Yeah, that is the soul of the brewery, right? Yeah. But honjoso, the other great thing about that, like not this particular category as a whole, is that they're never gonna be like $200, right? Even in this size, they probably won't go beyond like $75. And that's a pretty expensive honjoso, but still, like they present great value and like just so drinkable. right? Whereas sake number 2 is about the same price as the honjozo, so it's very good value. I would say that one with like aged fish, like like sushi, the fish gets aged in some styles, and it's very, very delicious. Like dry aged beef, you know, it gets more expensive too. So things with umami, like dashi, cheese, like salty cheese, and the second sake would be really delicious. Um, Sake number 1 with the pickled eggs at Peter Pan, I think would be really good. Shimesaba, like the cured mackerel, you know, cured mackerel would be really good. Sake number 3 with this ginjo, kind of gets that like I'm not sure about like why, but pea shoot sweetness. I get
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
So like pea shoots, or even like zucchini blossom, you know, when it becomes that time of the year, maybe it is. And sake number 4 is this like really juicy floral, kind of, yeah, there's some residual sugar, right? I think it's easy to drink a lot of that. Yeah. What was that?
I'm just changing my lights because it was upsetting me.
Yeah.
What was everyone's like, not favorite, but like a style that people really enjoyed? Oh, this is good. Oh, this is new. Yeah. Look, I'm going to say this right now. I don't do this because I work at Peter Pan and I want you all to go to Peter Pan and buy sake from me. There are so many better, intensely passionate sake like sellers and providers in Toronto, like Bathurst local, like Sakai Bar. They're the people. If you're a nerd about sake, this is where you go. I have sake that are really good for people who love wine and like to connect those dots, like G-Con. Like for some reason, G-Con wine lovers, it just matches in their brain somehow. And the Grape Witches, sure, they're okay. They're like the coolest people in the city. Sure.
I didn't put the shops right. Grape Witches, grape, yeah, grape glass.
And I'm excited that Regular has a sake fridge as of next week because
I'm very excited to receive it.
I'm going to ask some really difficult questions to Sean when I go there to drop off some sake.
He's gonna be like,
tell me all about every sake that's here.
He'll be like, this is my favorite Nightingale. That is his kind
of Nightingale. He loves it, and that's okay. I'm not mad at that.
Okay.
It's a beautiful sake.
Yeah. We're gonna have quite a few different sakes, and I get to choose them. So I'm gonna have fun. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hope everyone was super excited and like happy, and like these sakes are like the bomb. They're very, very delicious, and I'm so excited I got to taste them. And like Rachel and Pauline, and Krista, I guess, who existed in the first Hakko Gakko. Like this is so delicious, and we had a very different experience. I think we had the shuhari at the first session, and actually we started in like the north. We were in Aomari. I'm mispronouncing that.
Nobody?
Yeah, like right up the north, and then we're in Fukushima, and then we're like, so we had a whole different experience.
Yeah. That's true. Like last time was very different, so I kind of like tweaked a little bit, but it is really interesting just going back for a sec that like your sake selection is very you know, like I'm sure there's some things like you've mentioned you want to, you know, change up. As you taste more, that'll change too. And like the Grape Witch is what they have is just so them too. It'll really show the personality.
And that's a very good point in that like there isn't just one perfect sake list as much as there isn't a perfect wine list. Like there's not, and for me, for some reason, I like a Noto style. I love a saline intense flavor profile, and that's just kind of my deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone has their own sake styles, and like, you know, it's if you're in Toronto, this is a really big moment for a lot of sommeliers and wine professionals in this industry to like be exploring sake and to like understand what that is. Like, you know, I didn't have really a sake list before 2020 and Cresta and the Grape Witches, and you know, it's becoming much more prevalent. And I'm super intrigued just to see how this city, like Toronto, evolves through that. So
yeah. Well, like someone said, I think Glenn at Bathurst Local has a very Glenn list, you know, and it's great to see all these different expressions.
I haven't been there yet, and I really need to, and I need to like go incognito. I just feel like, I don't know, I buy a lot of sakes.
That's funny.
But like, if you want to know, like, I go to Glen. I will buy, if as someone who's a part of a sake course, I want to go to Sakai Bar and I want to go to Bathurst Local to like see what a sake store should be. And they're online, and you can buy them online. And I think that's a, you know, if you're interested in sake, this is a really good point, like to support. This is a really good way to support local businesses, especially in the pandemic. I wouldn't be this kind of like, you know, romantic about how horrible this whole last 2 years have been, but like that's kind of the world, right?
Yeah, 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 that's true. It's like things have certainly changed. Yeah, but yeah, everyone could use your help, and even the brewers who cannot sell sake to the big cities within Japan right now. You know, I think.
Yeah, tag them on Instagram and tell them how excited you are about their sake.
Please.
I think that's a super important point.
Instagram, not all of them, but a lot of them.
Some of them do.
Yeah, some of them do. Some of them, yeah. I know what they're doing.
You know, tag whoever, and just like keep following the tag to the source.
Yeah.
Tikon has a tag, and I don't know. But yeah,
like, my son does a good job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Nick. And I'm sorry.
Well, definitely noticed our yellow theme. It's very.
Yeah, we didn't do it.
Well, we'll coordinate next week more.
Yeah, it'll be probably a little bit short next. A little bit short next time.
I had a koi-based shirt on, and I was like, I'm going to be that blatant? But I mean, I can be more blatant, but I chose not to be. I was like, I'm going to cover this with a canary yellow overcoat.
The colors are very matching your new kitchen backsplash too. So
amazing. The people who are in Hakko Gakko, you don't understand how important this is. It's been bird earning for a very long time, and people have been watching a very undynamic background. Now you get to see this very fancy background.
And my logo that Sean designed with the right month of calendar. Yeah.
And we're gonna get enamel pins, socks, t-shirts.
Oh yeah.
Merch is on the way. And also, are you going to be doing a sake club for summer?
Yeah. So the summer edition will be released in June. So I'm going to announce it in May, which is like really soon, actually.
Yeah, so, come on.
You'll get a mystery. You can get a subscription to 2 bottles of sake and a lot of snacks that I love and I think go well with that sake.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You could be doing it.
What?
You could be doing it more than every 3 months. I'm just going to put it.
Yeah, that's true. And once I get all that the sake fridge in, then I have more like stock and things to play with. Sean's just like rolling his eyes even though he's not home. I feel like,
yeah, that's fair. Sake fridge is a big conversation to have with a lot of people, and I understand that firsthand. So we'll get there. But what's next for next week's sake? Like what's Hakko Gakko next week? What are we going over?
So next
before we
week
kick everyone off?
Is going to be more about shubo, so about the yeast starter, the fermentation starter that we kind of just really touched on. So we have 4 sakes. I think we were very lucky that we found some like really, really ancient styles that are being modernized now. We have 4 styles.
That's a crazy sake. I keep forgetting that's crazy sake.
Yeah, they're really like warm sake. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's like Yamahai, Kimoto, Mizumoto, and then a more like normal sake to compare those. But we're gonna get into like the wacky stuff next week. Yeah.
I hope everyone's excited. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for hanging out. I guess we're done. I don't think there's any other thing to say. Usually I'm more in the wine session, tasting sessions, I'm usually more in control. So I'm like controlling the narrative, but Mariko's in charge here.
Yeah, and then
it done, Mariko?
45 minutes in. Okay. Yeah, 3 hours. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're fine. But if you have any questions, or if you want to buy sake, or if you're buying a sake during the week and you want to ask what you're tasting and what you're doing, text, DM Mariko on Instagram, me. I can't do much, but we'll try. But let's keep chatting, and you'll understand how excited people are that you're excited about sake. So if you're excited about sake, reaching out to Mariko, reaching out to other places that sell sake, you're not bothering them. You're actually
please
exciting them, and you're making them feel validated for their passion. So do not be nervous about saying, hey, I bought this sake. Have you ever tasted it before? What do you think of it? Is this kind of cool? I don't know. And just keep tasting, keep trying new things, understand what sake is. And, I've learned a lot in the last 3 months, and that's only because of doing this and drinking a lot of sake. So just experiment and have some fun with it. That's my message for Hakko Gakko number 2. Cool.
Wendy's going to go back to grading her students, it says. Yeah, lucky students for sure. Okay, thanks everybody. See you next week.
Yeah, ciao, ciao, ciao.
Bye. Bye, Nick.